Hi, can I just check you're all on mute, are you?
Hello, Mr. Hurst. Yes, you're coming through quite quietly, but hopefully we should be able to hear you once our bell stops ringing.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening all. Welcome to the Crime and Disorder Committee meeting, postponed from earlier rather sad times. I'm required to go through the usual introductory notes. In the event of an emergency, there are no practice drills this evening, so it will be a real one if the alarms go off. We evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the high street or St. Runwell, whichever's most convenient. Meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available to watch afterwards. Please use your speakers. Would speakers please use their microphones at all times? And if you're coming in on Zoom, wait until your channel is fully connected before you start. Toilets are available on all floors. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but please set them on silent. We'll have a break at 7:30 if we've not finished, and every 90 minutes thereafter until 10 o'clock we stop by default. I'm Dennis Willits, chair of the Crime and Disorder Committee.
Councillor Darius Laws, Rural Ward North.
Mel Rundle, Safety and Protection Manager, Colchester Borough Council.
And DCI Rob Huddleston, late of Colchester District Commander.
Nathan Surley, Community Safety Manager for Colchester Borough Home.
Sonia Carr, Community Safety and Safeguarding for Colchester Borough Council.
And Beverly Jones, Chief Executive of Next Chapter.
Councillor Julie Young, Portfolio Holder for Housing and Communities.
Councillor Mike Hodgson, and St John's Wards.
Lee Scaldis, Old Heath Hive and Rowhedge.
Mike Lilly, Old Heath Hive and Rowhedge.
Owen Howell, Clerk to the Committee.
Councillor Sue Lissy-Moore, Pritchgate Ward.
Thank you, and I clarify that Councillor Hogg is substituting for Councillor Smith, who is indisposed this evening. There are no urgent items on item 3. Item 4, declarations of interest. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to declare that I hold a personal alcohol licence on behalf of a registered charity, should the distribution of alcohol come up in the conversation.
And Councillor Lilly.
I'm the neighbourhood watch coordinator for North Station around the area. In case it comes up tonight, there was a member of the public was going to come along, but I don't think they've turned up.
Thank you. Minutes of the meetings on the 4th of September 2021 and the 25th of May 2022. Do we approve them as a correct record? Thank you, colleagues. I will sign them afterwards. There is an item for Have Your Say. We have a Have Your Say speaker.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Ms. Natalie Summers, who wishes to address the committee on the halfway house on Hazelton Road, Pondfield.
If you'd like to come forward. You have 3 minutes from the time you start. And if we can answer your questions, we will do, comment. And then you have another minute just to advise us of whether we've done well or not. So it's over to you.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to come here this evening to speak on behalf of the residents of Pondfield Road and Hazelton Road, particularly the ones bounding on the halfway house that's on the corner. And they've had several antisocial behaviour issues. Since the removal of the warden, the neighbouring residents have catalogued a series of disturbances and unlawful antisocial behaviour over the summer months. We've had cars stopping to deal drugs. They turn up with their horns blaring, announcing their presence. There's been all-night partying, which has been a huge problem for residents in the hot weather because they've been unable to sleep with their windows open. Neighbours are being woken up by people banging on their windows. There's loud, aggressive shouting and banging with obscene language, trespassing on neighbours' properties. There's been police raids, I believe, altercations in the street. Residents believe this has been exacerbated by the halfway house on Harwich Road, with people travelling back and forth between there to socialise and deal drugs. Residents are being unable to quietly enjoy their own gardens in the summer due to the level of antisocial behaviour and bad language. And just today received another report from a resident stating that there was loud shouting and swearing in the street at 8 AM this morning. Added to that, there's the appearance generally of the property, the grounds. There's lots of rubbish lying about, including food, which has led to some rat problems. There are ladders lying on the ground, leading the residents to wonder what these ladders are for, with security concerns, and general unkempt sort of grounds and things with weeds and everything. So one residence and its occupants are making it miserable and impossible for at least 20, if not more, properties to live peacefully. There's been discussions going back and forth with Councillor Paul Smith and others. And whilst the situation has improved recently with supervision during the day and some surveillance at night, the residents would like to be assured that the warden will be made permanent once more and the increased police patrols are continued. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. It is the function of this particular committee to scrutinise the Safer Colchester partnership and the associated issues. We have no executive authority as such. Many of the issues that you're raising are to do with the day-to-day running of the council or the police. Councillor Julie Young is the portfolio holder who leads in this area, and I wonder whether she's able to briefly answer any of those questions.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's not something I'm familiar with at all. I've taken verbatim notes, and I'm sure the committee clerk has done too. And I will liaise with Councillor Paul Smith to see how he's getting on in terms of resolving the issues at the property. I think there's a range of organisations and individuals that need to be involved in finding a solution here. But you know, I thank the resident for coming and highlighting the issues that are being faced in the area, and we will get back to her with a written response.
Can we minute Councillor Young's response as the reply? You have a minute to respond to Councillor Young.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Yeah, we would be very grateful to have meetings. I know the residents would like to have meetings along with the police if possible as well to discuss the issues. Thank you.
So we leave it in Councillor Young's very capable hands in conjunction with Councillor Smith to deal with this issue. Thank you for attending this evening. We now move into the main item of this evening's meeting, which is to scrutinise the work of the Safer Colchester Partnership during the period 2021 to 2022. And you'll also see in the report that there are also references to the future plans for 2022-23, which are not all that different from the past year, because clearly there's a degree of continuity involved. I just set out the legal framework. The Crime and Disorder Act 1998 sets out a statutory requirement for local agencies to work together in partnership, which is why we have the Safer Colchester Partnership, work together to tackle crime in the local area. And the Crime and Disorder Overview and Scrutiny Regulations 2009 require that this committee meets at least once a year to review the work and progress of the partnership, and also to receive a statutory crime and disorder report from the police. The membership of the Safer Colchester Partnership is on page 37 of your of your order paper. And you'll see that there are a significant number of organisations involved in the partnership working, which makes it quite difficult for us as a panel to identify what is happening and the effectiveness with which it is being done. But it's quite clear that in many of these areas, the work of agencies overlaps, and it is more effective to work in a partnership arrangement to address the issues, albeit difficult to see just how the performance is going. It also helps with the data sharing between agencies to enable partners to target the resources where they are needed most. The partnership has a statutory duty to carry out an annual strategic assessment of crime, which involves analysing the data on the frequency and location of types of crime. And Chief Inspector Huddleston will be reporting on that at the beginning of our proceedings on this particular item. The Safer Colchester Partnership Annual Plan interlocks with the Police and Crime Plan for 2021 to 24. And I believe we have the Commissioner on the line who may wish to say just a few words about the matter as we get started. There are three major areas of interest, the main priorities shown on page 38 of the order paper. Which identify the specific issues which the partnership is providing and which we are therefore scrutinising. Priority 1, tackling organised crime. Priority 2, driving down antisocial behaviour and violent crime and hate crime. And priority 3, identifying and supporting the victims of domestic abuse and sexual offences, and in particular reducing violence against women and girls. And all that is detailed in a very readable form on the order paper. So in previous sessions of this committee, we've had some very long and detailed presentations to us, which have precluded the time available for questioning. So this evening, I hope we can take the majority of it as read, and instead we'll have some short, brief presentations in turn on each of those three priorities. So I suggest for the rest of the evening, we follow this particular plan. We've dealt with the public speaker. Councillor Julie Young will address us with a few words because it is her area of portfolio responsibility. The Crime Commissioner will then say a few words to us on what's happening on the overall strategies. Chief Inspector Huddleston, who has actually moved off from this area, has kindly come back to us this evening, a good old friend who's always been most helpful to us councillors. But of course, we are actually scrutinising the partnerships report for last year when he was at the helm. So it's quite fitting that he should be here, even if he's moved on to other pastures. Then we will have a 10-minute presentation on each of the priorities 1, 2, and 3. And we'll have opportunities to question after each priority. Because I think on previous occasions, we've had lots and lots of presentations, and it's been really difficult to identify which question applies to what at the end of it. After the discussion or presentations and questioning on the three priorities, there'll be an opportunity for members to raise any other programme and priority issues which we believe the Colchester Safer Partnership should be addressing or including, and then go on to formulate any recommendations, if indeed there are any recommendations to go forward. So, Councillor Young, the floor is yours. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Just to say, I do have a statement to read out from the current chair of the Community Safety Partnership, Lucy Bregman, who isn't able to be with us this evening, but did want me to put her thoughts out for everyone this evening, if that's okay.
Yes, most certainly.
Thanks very much. Good evening, Chair and members and partnership representatives around the table. We talk a lot about partnership, but for me, you know, in talking to serving police officers that I have and various people involved in this work, what they say to me is the partnership in Colchester is better than any borough or city or town in Essex. So it's really well developed. And I think that is very much down to the leadership we've had by the chair of the partnership board. It used to be Pam Donnelly. She's now not doing that. But I think Pam has got such a good level of experience in various different organisations that she brings to the table that she's been really successful in pulling things together here in Colchester. The second thing I will say is that the quality of our CCTV seems to be second to none. I visited the police force control room recently, and I sat with officers that are taking the calls in, and I could see Colchester High Street, I could see Crouch Street there in Chelmsford, and they can see things as they're emerging straight on the screen. And that link that they have here in Colchester is so valuable to the police in terms of that intelligence and seeing what's directly going on. I looked at what was in tendering. I think they had one camera focused on McDonald's, and that was about it. And I think that's the sort of stark reality. And we sometimes take for granted how well developed our CCTV system here is in Colchester. And I know that there's a review going on at the moment, which will hopefully look at and see how we can improve that. And it often comes up in terms of how people feel safe in our communities and how we can actually extend that to, better make that available to make sure people are safer. As we know, we've got challenging budgets here in Colchester. And our neighbourhood teams are now fully up to speed in terms of resources. So I think we've got 4 wardens now, and they work really closely with the police town centre teams. And that is another thing that has recently been brought up to full capacity. I think the fact that we've got 2 officers in Lisa and Sonia that sit directly in the police station, so they are on a day-to-day basis right at the heart of crime and disorder in the police station. And it's all of those informal relationships that can be built with those officers that I think really does strengthen that partnership. Going forward, we're early days in terms of our alliance work, but I think the hub at the old Poundland store where Community 360 is currently based, I know the police use that resource, and it's a centre for us when we do the nights of action, which we've had 2 recently. And coming together with our licensing officers, our police officers, some councillors often go out on those walkabouts as well. That really does strengthen our understanding and approach to how we do things here in Colchester. Licensing, of course, has a really important role, and I know members around the table sit on those licensing hearings in terms of our licensed premises and also our taxis and the intelligence that actually can be gathered from our taxi drivers in the town. We do have really experienced and good quality officers here working, and I know, all credit to Inspector Huddleston that sadly no longer going to be working with us here in Colchester, but we look forward to his replacement. It'd be good to hear when he's joining us. But we do have good officers in terms of Inspector Austin that has extended an opportunity for any councillor that wants to go and visit the police station to do so. So I'll deliver that offer to you, Chair, to take that opportunity up. And finally, Chair, I will say that it's always you always feel a bit in the hot seat here as a councillor coming, and when you're having your particular work scrutinised. I'm only 5 months into this brief, so it's early days for me. But I think that sometimes, when you get challenging questions, a bit of a curveball from members, it's no bad thing because it makes you actually go away, do some work. And I think, think back to the councillor Sue Lissamore's question the last time when I was here talking about housing in that case, just what a piece of learning that question has been for me personally, and how we can use those difficult questions to make sure we focus on the things that matter for us as ward councillors, but ultimately what matters for our residents here in Colchester, and the important voice that councillors bring to the table in sharing their insight and intelligence through the scrutiny function in the course of the evenings that we have here together, Chair. I will leave it there. I have nothing more spectacular to say to you than that. I could tell you lots of information about how many pupils did Crucial Crew and all of that. A lot of that is in the reports, as you rightly say, that is there for
Yes. Does improving the CCTV quality, getting more an increase in the number of offenders who have been apprehended, or do we just get a better view of the people who get away?
Well, I think a bit of both, really. I understand that it certainly does help identify individuals. And, I saw pictures of certain people that are pinned up in the police station, which are the sort of people to watch out for. So as long as they can see them easily on our CCTV systems, then there is a watchful eye going on in Colchester, and I see nods from Inspector Huddleston. But it is just in terms of the quality of what you're looking at. I looked at various systems, Brentwood, tendering, various systems, but ours was absolutely, I have to say, the best system that was being demonstrated to me at the Force Control Room.
Yes, Chief Inspector.
So I can give you a specific example where quality worked, and the gentleman in question has been sentenced to 10 years today. This was somebody we've been looking for a very long time around the north of Essex, a really violent man who had assaulted his partner very seriously. An eagle-eyed operator spotted him and was able to guide us through a very crowded Castle Park to his location where we arrested him. And the quality of CCTV was such that he had no choice but to plead guilty because identification wasn't actually an issue. So yeah, really, really important.
That is incredibly good news. Members of the panel, do you have any questions at this stage for Councillor Young? Well, in that case, can we move on to the Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Yes, so thank you very much for having me along this evening. Delighted to be able to join in your scrutiny of the Community Safety Partnership and the Community Safety Plan here in Colchester. Would echo everything that Councillor Young said. I think Colchester really is a very good example of where the partnership works really well. Maybe just a few words from me about the bigger picture across the county. It would ill behove me, I think, to miss out on mentioning that as of Friday, with the passing out parade that we had there, Essex Police is now the biggest and strongest it has been in its 182-year history. Really quite an exciting day to get to that point, and to be able to say that we now have 3,686 cops. That's more than 800 more than we had 5 years ago, which I think is a very big step forward. And of course, a big commitment there, particularly to preventative policing, which means, as Councillor Young said, town centre teams, which we didn't have before, are now there and are now an integral part of what we're doing. The rural crime team, also a new innovation, which I think has made a big difference. And I know that you in Colchester are a good mix of some rural and some urban, now with your city status, even more headlined urban than you have been before. But I think it's made a difference to your part of the world as well as bolstering the community policing teams and developing some very specialist teams around particular crimes like domestic abuse. So we have domestic abuse problem solving teams now who are working with the victims. I think we support the victims of domestic abuse a lot better than we did, but they are very much focused on dealing with the perpetrators and making sure that we reduce that level of crime, that particularly noxious level of crime, in domestic abuse beyond what we've been able to do so far. So quite a big focus there and a big improvement, I think, happening as we speak. And of course, continuing to work with you and your colleagues around reducing drug-driven violence and violence against women and girls in the more public space. We have a really strong town centre partnership with you and with the traders and the nighttime economy people in the centre of Colchester. I think that's a real success, but we are very conscious of the need to make Colchester an even safer place than it is at the moment. So we've had some real success. You know, if we compare where we are in Colchester now with the period before COVID, the COVID data itself is massively distorted because, of course, if people are locked down and not able to leave their homes, there is much less crime around. So we won't compare ourselves with the COVID lockdown years. But if we compare ourselves with the period before lockdown, crime in the last 12 months in Colchester is very much overall in line with where it was before, so flatlining. But interestingly, a big change in the balance. So we've seen a big reduction in things like burglary and theft. Burglary down by, I think, somewhere around nearly 30%, 28% or so. Antisocial behaviour down robustly by about 40%. But the flip side of that, sadly, is that we have seen growth in violent crimes and rape and serious sexual assault. So violent crime, etc., is up by around 10% compared to where we were before. That obviously is a bad news story, and it's something that we really need to get to grips with. And that is somewhere where we are very keen to work with you and are working with you very closely. So I would just cite the joint submissions that we made to the Safer Streets Fund, one around your town centre, one around the Greensteads area, both worth the better part of £500,000 each, and match funded between you and ourselves. That, I think, is already well underway. They're both well underway, seeing a lot of success in terms of where we've done those Safer Streets Fund investments in other areas of the county already. So up and running already in Chelmsford, in Grays, and it's certainly had a good impact both in reducing the level of street crime and in helping people, particularly women and girls, to feel safer. Of course, there's another area where CCTV plays a big role, but it's not just CCTV. It's also improving the landscaping, the sight lines, the ability to monitor what's going on and have people feel that they are in a space which is observed and has guardians, but also reaching out to groups, whether that be schools and the university, of course, around Greensteads, whether it be representative groups, particularly around women and girls, and helping them understand how to be safe and what's being done for them to help keep them safe, and how they can join in with that, and how to report stuff when they see it going on. So a lot of activity taking place there, and I'm very optimistic that those two projects in particular are going to have a big positive impact on the level of safety in your borough. But certainly, as Councillor Young said, an area where we have really strong partnership. We really value the community safety partnership that you have. I think looking at your plan, from my perspective, very well aligned with the key priorities of the police and crime plan across the county. So very pleased to see the focus on drug-driven violence, on domestic abuse that we have in there. Those are the things that we know, and of course, violence against women and girls. Those are the things that we know we need to do more on, where we must get better across the county. And it's really good to see your community safety partnership working in that way and supporting it. Perhaps just a final reflection on the question you had about CCTV. I know from my chairing the Criminal Justice Board in the county, there are very few successful prosecutions that happen these days without CCTV playing a part. It is getting increasingly better. You have very good CCTV here. Chief Inspector Huddleston just told you about one particular case, but I would just say the impact of better video evidence. And we just introduced a new digital asset management service to mean that the availability of CCTV in the interview room is going to be much improved. It leads to quite a very substantial increase in early guilty pleas, which of course is both positive in the pursuit of justice, but also very positive in the cost-effective pursuit of justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your praise of the partnership. It is well received. Roger, whenever I hear any statistics, I always try and challenge them in some way. So great news that we have more police officers than ever before in Essex. Are you talking about old Essex or new Essex? Because when I was a boy, Essex used to include Ongar, Epping and Romford even, I think. So is this statistic in modern times, or is it an all-time statistic, even when Essex police covered a larger area?
There were those heady days, of course. I should reassure you, Epping and Ongar are both still in the county, both within the policing area and the ceremonial county of Essex. Romford, as you rightly point out, sadly is no longer, although when I go to Romford, I am told by the residents they still think of themselves as Essex residents. But in the old days before the 1960s local government reorganisation, of course, Epping stretched all the way into Ilford, Barking, Dagenham, and indeed Stratford. You know, West Ham was very much an Essex football team, though I may say so. Nothing against Colchester United, but I know where a lot of people's loyalties lie. The statistic covers all of the history of Essex Police. So back into the days when we had much of East London in here as well.
Well, in that case, it really is good news, isn't it? Yes, super. Members of the panel, do you have any brief remarks to address to Roger? Councillor Scordis.
I mean, I would question that remark over we have more police officers than ever. We know as councillors in Colchester that our police officers are overstretched. They're going from one crime 999 call to another, and 101 calls are not being attended to. Burglaries and so forth, if they've happened, are not seen as a priority because we don't have the officers. But this wasn't happening 10 to 15 years ago. So why is it happening now? You know, crime is on the rise. We can see that, and we're completely dependent on CCTV, as you've admitted. So I completely dispute this idea that we have more police officers than ever. And if so, we're not seeing them in Colchester. It's as simple as that. And this is talking to police officers on the ground. They're completely overstretched. They're usually getting calls to go to custody. We've heard reports that on some nights out, there have been no police at all because they've had to take people to hospital who've been involved in fights. And because they've been in fights, they obviously had to be arrested once they're treated. So it's really serious. And I just don't believe these statistics. Or if they're correct, they're either including specials and PCSOs who aren't the same as police officers. So I would have to dispute those facts. And if they are true, where are resources? There's something gone wrong here, seriously wrong.
I think, Councillor Scordis, your second question was rather different from your first question on the statistics, because how resources are deployed and the absolute level of resources are quite different. But I mean, can you just confirm what the numbers are, Roger? Because it is being queried whether there are more police officers, and that presumably there is a sort of a factual basis. There is a sort of declaration of how many police officers we have, which sort of cannot be challenged. Someone must have counted them.
So Essex Police make a statutory return to the Home Office about the number of officers, both in terms of simple headcount strength and full-time equivalent officers. And we compare that against the budget that we have for full-time equivalent officers on a monthly basis. I can only deal with the evidence. I understand Councillor Scordis's sentiment that he would like to see more, but the reality is that we now have 3,686 full-time equivalent officers. So we have more than that in terms of headcount strength. And that compares with the previous high water mark of 3,600 full-time equivalent. That was a relatively temporary and brief period of 4 months back in 2010. The previous sustained high was 3,400. At that time, we were bringing crime down. And as I said earlier, at this time, we are bringing crime down. I think there is definitely stretch. So if we look at the total number of crimes in the county, which is about 160,000 a year now, about 50,000 of those are actually crimes that have been defined by law within the last 6 years. So things like controlling and coercive behaviour within the domestic abuse area, stalking and harassment within the violent crime area, and of course what were previously legal high drugs, which are now illegal highs. All of those, as Councillor Scordis rightly points out, are additional demand on police time. So taking that into account, yes, the stretch is still there, and I would hate to be misunderstood as saying that this is the end of the road and we're now there. I and the Chief Constable both wish to continue to invest in Essex Police, but I would also point out that over the last 5 years or so, we have invested substantially in new technologies. These sorts of devices, which every officer now has, mean that they can do an awful lot more while they are out on patrol with the public. They don't have to return to station and spend as much time as they used to sitting behind a desk doing paperwork. And that means that on average, we have about an hour more per shift that the officer can spend with the public as opposed to in a police station. And that is, again, effectively a 10% lift in the strength and power of Essex Police beyond the simple expansion of numbers. So I do hear what Councillor Scordis says about the stretch on policing. And of course, there is a requirement to deal with mental health sufferers and to take those who are injured to hospital. And if they are felons, offenders, they need to have police with them. I think there is undoubted stretch on our mental health services, on our health service, and police, and indeed on our social services. And policing is often left as, because it is the service of first response, it ends up, unfortunately, also being the service of last resort. And that is a stretch on policing. And we need to deal with all of that. But the facts are that the number of police are up and that crime is coming down.
Can I just check, Councillor Scordis, that you're withdrawing the claim that the number of police officers has been incorrectly declared to the Home Office, which is what the Commissioner was saying when he said there were more police officers than ever. That is his statutory declaration. Are you challenging that?
I mean, I was disputing it, but
Well,
there's not much more that I can
either
do
you
with
are
that.
or you're not disputing it. And while I support to a certain extent your latter remarks on the use of resources, the question of whether the numbers have been incorrectly declared, do you wish to pursue that?
No, that's fine. If they're the figures that Mr. Hurst has, they're the figures.
Okay, thank you. But I think the second point that you make, which is the effectiveness with which policing is carried out, is a very justifiable question, both at the Essex level and also at the local level, which we'll be hearing from the Chief Inspector in a moment.
It is
Any other questions?
making one more point, if I may, Chair.
Sorry, I missed that.
If I may just make one more point, thinking about Councillor Scordis's comments, particularly around burglary. I think he's probably picking up on the national press coverage and the fact that the Home Office has recently said that all burglaries should be attended. The reality is that here in Essex, we have had that policy in place for quite some time, and I monitor it through my regular reviews through my Performance and Resources Scrutiny Board. We're not perfect and we don't hit that target every time, but it is the case that dwelling burglary, home burglary, requires a police attendance in this county and has done for the last few years.
I trust Chief Inspector Huddleston will be addressing the remarks made by, is it Andy Cook, the Inspector of Inspector of Police, in his remark in regard to Colchester. Councillor Lissimore.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Scordis said when, and I think, sorry if I'm paraphrasing here, that specials are not proper police officers. Since I have learned what specials do, I have been extremely pleasantly shocked by their work. They work alongside official police officers, and a lot of them use their role as a special to gain valuable experience to then become what Councillor Scordis would call proper police officers themselves. But may I just ask that he looks into what specials actually do, because they don't just do crowd control. They don't just stand by the side of the road at a carnival or remembrance service. They work as, although they are volunteers, they work as full police officers. And I would suggest that he investigates what they actually do and perhaps visits the police station and speaks to some of them, because their work is absolutely fantastic, especially as volunteers, and a lot of them go on to become full police officers. Just two things I would like to mention to I was going to say Councillor Hurst then, going back a few years. Number one, the one thing that you haven't mentioned, which does sort of come into our remit at all, and I heard you quoted the other day that something I worked with you in the past was about unauthorised encampments, and that the encampments unauthorised encampments have actually decreased by, I think you said 70%, but I wonder if you could just mention that just a little bit, because that has a knock-on effect to Colchester Borough Council, obviously with the antisocial behaviour problem, land ownership problems, and littering, that type of thing. And also with regards to the extra police officers that you are recruiting, and I saw that the pass out parade, was well documented a couple of days ago that you participated in. What do you see as your vision on how those extra officers will be used? Will they be spread across the board, or will you be using them in particular categories to try and help local people?
Thank you for both those questions.
Yes, my sister was born in London.
Sorry? Shall I go on?
Sorry, we have some technical difficulties. Someone else was talking over the top of you and no one was opening their mouths around the table. Yeah, try again.
I'll try again. Okay, thank you. Thank you for both those questions. You're right, I was a bit remiss in not singing the praises of the rural engagement team quite highly enough, but certainly they have halved the level of hare coursing across the county. And the 70% statistic is both, you have to combine both the number and duration of unlawful encampments. So we have many fewer of them, about half as many, and they're shorter. So combine those two and it's actually 70% fewer, in less time incursions on people's land. So yes, it is a big step forward. And most of that's actually been achieved through better partnership working with people like yourselves. We haven't yet really seen the full benefit of the new law brought in under the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act earlier this year. We've already had a couple of prosecutions under that, but not very many so far. But I think actually it's not really the number of prosecutions we want to see go up. My experience is that the people perpetrating these unlawful incursions and the damage that goes with it are actually remarkably familiar with the legal framework. And now that we have a tougher law, they know how far they can go, and that is less far. So actually that is contributing to the downturn in unlawful behaviour across the country. Secondly, your question about the extra officers, and thank you for your very kind words about the Special Constabulary. I think I failed to clarify that the numbers I was citing are fully warranted regular officers. I wasn't including PCSOs or specials. We do have the second largest Special Constabulary in the country. It is a real success and they do an amazing job. The extra officers that we've just brought in, when they're all through their training, which they are, and they'll be being deployed within the next couple of weeks, actually. The main thrust of our police and crime plan over the last few years and this expansion program has been a strategic swing to prevention. Now, that doesn't just mean advising people on having better locks on their doors and windows and burglar alarms. Actually, crime prevention is very much about the sort of things that we're doing through the Safer Streets Fund, but actually very much about proactive policing. So proactive patrols in town centres, in shopping areas, in crime hotspots. We've got a operation in place which is based on some academic work done by one of our chief inspectors, sadly, who's since gone off to join the Metropolitan Police, but he did a lot of work here before he went. He's now joined them as a superintendent, but he did some work around crime hotspots using data better, using modern data technology gathering abilities better, focusing on where crime is happening and deploying police there on a regular patrol basis. Where we did the pilot, it reduced crime by 80%. And we're rolling that out across the county as part of this program. It didn't displace crime, it actually cut it. And it's those sorts of problem-solving interventions, dealing with known crime hotspots, using better technology, modern technology better to work out where we have those hotspots and patrolling them proactively, working out where we have known offenders and how we can manage them better and prevent them from becoming reoffenders. And actually, really importantly, working out where we have at-risk vulnerable people. It is, for one of the things that I've found most surprising and concerning since I've been in this role, is the people who are victims of crime are very, very often vulnerable people who are at risk. And criminals know how to prey on them. And if we can use the data that you share with us, that the county shares with us, that health and education share with us, to identify those at-risk people and keep them safe, that will massively reduce crime as well. So it is that strategic swing to prevention, both through practical, we might call concrete measures in the lived environment, but more importantly, really through problem-solving interventions, be that around drug crime, around domestic abuse, or around violence against women and girls, and keeping people safe, that the real investment is being made in. I'm absolutely determined, and I've said this to the previous Prime Minister and to the Home Office and the current Home Secretary, the 20,000 police uplift programme, of which we have had our share now, the 20,000 uplift programme has to mean 1 million fewer crimes, not 200,000 more people in front of the courts.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly, questions to the Commissioner?
Not sure where to start, to be honest, but yeah, hi Roger. I hear what you're saying, and but in the reality, it's not quite like that. How do you address the fact that shoplifters are going free on the street after being caught, and especially the response times under when people call 999? I know the Essex Police recently were taking the task over the triple murder that happened and the lack of time they took to respond to that. And those people, these are people, they're not police officers, they work on the phones. And then when shoplifters are caught in shops, they are totally ignored, they're not being responded to. by the police as such, because not deemed priority. And when they are caught, they're not prosecuted. It's a shame that one of the major failings of policing in this day and age is the fact that the CPS are failing, you know as well, are failing to actually take more people to court and to prosecute more. But with the COVID situation and the lack of people working there, there's a massive backlog in that. It's a real shame. But we hear about the nighttime economy, and we all know about that. But the daytime economy is actually being ignored, isn't there? The shops are being left to, on their own sort of means, that they have to employ people to sort out security. When in court, they are then not prosecuted or let out again. And you were talking about proactive policing in hotspots. This weekend, it was horrendous with the cars being broken into around Colchester, Riverside, down the Hive. And there was a couple near where I live, Causton Road.
Councillor Lilly, you're addressing the Commissioner on policing in Essex. That I think that question would probably be better put to Chief Inspector Huddleston when we get to policing in Colchester.
Okay, but he.
I mean, ask the question by all means, but
yeah, I was just going to ask the question.
To expect the Commissioner to know of the details about thefts in a particular car park.
No, but Roger was talking about proactive patrolling in areas, but I'm afraid that doesn't happen, does it? Mainly because the situation we brought it up earlier, the police in Colchester, they could be out on patrol. They get a call from the Lakes Medical Hospital. Somebody is absconded. They have to take priority over everything. But there are no other officers to take their place on the streets. They have to prioritise looking for that missing person. And that's another failure of the Lakes, the mental health situation. So what you're saying, yeah, is great, but it's not actually in reality happening like that. The lack of responses to 999 calls is a major worry, especially amongst shops and retail owners. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
So if I may, Chair, I think we've strayed into territory which Councillor Lilly and I stray into very frequently, but it is the business of the Police, Fire and Crime panel, not the business of your panel here this evening. I have not come here this evening to be scrutinised by your panel. I've come in to join the scrutiny of your Community Safety Partnership. Councillor Lilly knows that he has cited many things for which he has no evidence. I can only deal in the stuff for which we have evidence, and the actual numbers of police officers and of crimes. I'm not going to deflect us into having a tit for tat debate this evening around whether crime is up or down in Colchester.
Yeah, I think it is absolutely so. The function this evening is to scrutinise the Safer Colchester partnership, and it is useful to have a county-wide perspective of those issues which are germane to the Safer Colchester partnership. But I agree. There's certain questions which we cannot bowl at the Commissioner. And for instance, if you wish to criticise the prosecution service, they are not the responsibility of anyone around the table. But as a scrutiny panel, we can, of course, have a work item to scrutinise the working of the CPS insofar as it is effective in Colchester, and you can put a work item down at the scrutiny panel to look at that if you believe it is an issue. But I agree it's not a fair question to the Commissioner. Are there any other questions, Councillor Laws?
I hope it's a fair question. Commissioner, thank you for your time this evening. As you will agree, Essex is the engine of the UK economy. And it's been sad to see scenes recently where many good, honest, hardworking, law-abiding people who get up at the crack of dawn have been disrupted by eco-terrorists. And I just wondered what political cover, it's an Essex-wide issue, so that it's appropriate to raise it. What political cover do our great Essex police force have should such activities arrive on the streets of Colchester? And is it cover that, you know, we as councillors can offer, you as the commissioner, or do we need to see the government and the Home Secretary offer more political cover so that these eco-terrorists are dealt with swiftly?
Thank you very much, Councillor Laws. I suspect we're heading off piste again, so I'll be extremely brief. I provide the cover. We have a very robust approach here in Essex.
And it's not the business of the Safer Colchester Partnership, for sure. Okay. So if there are any other questions to the Commissioner within his jurisdiction insofar as it affects the Safer Colchester Partnership, ask them now. Otherwise, can I express our thanks to you for joining us this evening, our apologies for straying outside the brief, but it's so tempting when we have you there as a captive to bowl additional questions at you. But thank you for your attendance this evening.
Thank you. Come to the police crime panel, ask more questions there. It's really good.
I'll see you at the crime panel. Good. We now move over to the statement from Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I will remove anything that's a duplication of what's already been said because I'm very conscious of time. So firstly, thank you to all partners in the room and virtually that the last 12 months have continued to be challenging. Faced with ongoing COVID complications, staffing shortages across the whole system and an unusually hot summer, which comes with added community safety considerations, and all in a climate where citizens feel unsettled and worried about a myriad of things, not least the cost of living crisis. The challenges we face rarely fall into the lap of one organisation, and working together has never been more critical. As chair of the Community Safety Partnership, I'm proud to facilitate what I feel is one of the most successful whole system approaches in tackling problems. We've been working together effectively with the police for many years, from developing a shared approach to town centre safety along with our businesses, through to working with our communities, developing a rural safety toolkit and our communities can approach. Also working with the university, Colchester Borough Homes, Environmental Health, Neighbourhood Watch, Probation and many others to deal with resident concerns. Working together across such a broad spectrum of organisational, business and the voluntary and community sector partners gives us more insight, more capacity and more focus. I see a willingness to collaborate and to share information to support each other. Every meeting I'm asked if another organisation can join the table, adding to the reach and capacity of our partnership. I fear with the challenges to come, we are going to need this united effort more than ever, but we have a superb foundation and established relationships that make almost anything possible. Our approach to work in a united way with One Colchester Partners has also proved successful. The strategic leaders of the statutory Safer Colchester Partnership sit within the One Colchester Board and are supported by the Crime and Disorder Delivery Board. This approach has reduced duplication, brought more partners to the table, and most importantly, resulted in our more collaborative approach, better sharing of information, and ultimately more ability to tackle the problems and make Colchester a safer place to live, visit, and work. I'm now delighted to hand over to some of our key partners who are going to talk you through a high-level overview of the 3 CSP priorities for the last 12 months and the work they've been doing. As ever, we invite you to ask questions and scrutinise our approach, and we will pause between each priority for questions and discussion. So I'd now like to hand over to Inspector Huddleston.
I've got a question first before we do that. You say that you're increasing the number of people involved in the partnership. Is there any proof that increasing number of people actually, or organisations involved in the partnership, actually improves its effectiveness? Because at the moment you have 6 statutory responsible authorities present in the partnership, and you have, unless we go over to the next page, at least 20 other organisations. And it just seems to me that with 20 additional partners, it must be getting a bit on the unwieldy stages at times. So is there any evidence to show that continually increasing the number of people involved, although it makes it sound greater and more embracing, actually improves the quality of delivery?
So Chair, I'll take that question. What increasing in the number gives us is the ability to data share far easier. And far from being unwieldy, it gives us a bigger pool to dip our rod into to address specific issues, bring in expertise a lot easier. And to give you some good examples of the nighttime economy, where we saw in the press the spiking being reported, we were able to form a nighttime economy working group very rapidly to respond to that in both prevent, protect, prepare and pursue elements. And I can give you further examples, refugee relocation and the engagement through the partners we brought there through Refugee Action have ensured that those refugees coming into Colchester have had a lot more of a smoother ride and less disruption to local services than in other areas in Essex. So, my personal view is the wider we have that pool, the more people we have signed up to it. We're not talking about 300 people attending every meeting. What we have the ability to do is look at that yellow pages of CSP partners, pick those most effective to address that particular issue and solve that particular problem.
That is good news indeed. Now, while you're talking, the next issue on the agenda is that you have to give us a strategic assessment of crime. It's a legal obligation. And this is the strategic view for Colchester, not Essex or anywhere else, just Colchester. Okay, in your hands.
Just put up our slide. It's got facts and figures on it for you. So I think we need 4, please. Okay, so as you can see there, we've got some statistics for you to talk through. And these figures are on a comparison, as Mr. Hurst said, to 2021. That 11.3% increase on recorded crime is in comparison to a time when everyone was sat at home in their houses, all our businesses were closed down. And so I decided to look back at 2019 for that particular piece of statistic for you. And overall, since 2019, crime has increased in Colchester by 0.52%. So really, really negligible. But what we have seen in the last 12 months especially is a 53.7% reduction in ASB. And when I come into the slideshow, I'll talk in a bit more detail, but that is around that investment in officer growth. That's around that development of town centre teams. It's around the use of our rural engagement team. And most importantly, it's focusing on that prevent strategy, the use of orders to enforce against people who have committed offending to stop them offending in the future. If I look at actual figures for the year to date to August 2019, 18,806 crimes were recorded into Colchester. In the year to date to August 2022, 18,904 crimes recorded. So you can see that real slight change over the last 3 years. And when we look wider, that's a real flat line for us and a testament to the work the Safety Partnership have done. And if we look at crimes per 1,000 population, we sit at 97.1 crimes per 1,000 population. To give you some further examples, Harlow is 132.4 crimes per 1,000 people, Southend 115.9, Basildon 108.8, Tendring 97.7 and Thurrock 97.6. So you can see we are way down the list in terms of our crime per head of population. And that's based on our 2011 census figures. And we know that our city's increased dramatically since then. And we are subject to an independent survey where a random sample of residents, and I can provide the data analytics behind it, are surveyed, but 73% of Colchester residents have confidence in their local policing. 78% believe we're doing a good and excellent job. One of the key measures we look at when we look at that survey is the number who have been victims who say we do a good, excellent job compared to the number who haven't been victims who say we do a good, excellent job. And Colchester is the only district in Essex that has no gap. 70% 68% of victims think Essex Police deliver a good and excellent service to them, and 78% of non-victims think they do. Second to us is Southend with a 1% gap, and then the next gap is around 6 or 8% between victims and non-victims. So we're definitely getting it right. 76% of people are confident in receiving a good service, and only 16% feel ASB or crime has become more of an issue over the last 12 months. And as Mr. Hurst mentioned, we are focused heavily on our prevention, and I'll mention it now and I'll challenge councillors to call this. We attend every dwelling burglary incident on the day it is reported, and I can produce the statistics for our attendance for that. What you have to be aware of is shed burglary, garage burglary and commercial burglary do not count in that figure. What we are talking about is house burglary. Okay. And in terms of our strategic overview, we're focused still on the same three CSP approaches, which I'll talk about a little bit more under our key approaches. But we are committed to violence against women and girls, driving down that drug-led violence, and you'll see some examples of the work that we've already done around that. The key areas for us are around supporting our victims, ensuring that if somebody's a victim of crime, they get the best service they can possibly get. It's around reduction of violence. It's about, as Mr. Hurst referred to again, identification of that vulnerability and stopping vulnerable people becoming victims of crime in the first place. And it's about our visibility, and Councillor Scaldis has mentioned it, and I know Councillor Lilly and I have chatted about it, that visibility of policing, that ability to conduct proactive patrols. And to give you that reassurance, Colchester is the only district where every op-grip hotspot is hit 100% of the required time. It doesn't occur in any other. We've invested in the teams and we've set the teams up so they have that ability to conduct that proactive patrol. And this all ties back to our Chief's overall force plan, Mr. Hurst's plan, and I'll sum it up in three phrases. We're here to help people, we're here to keep people safe, and we are mostly here to catch criminals. That's the strategic overview, Chair.
Thank you. Good to know that we are hitting the, this could have gone, the 75% or 78% on confidence and view of the job that the police do being excellent or thereabouts. What about the other 25% that are not there? Do they disagree with that view, or are they neutral, or did they just not return their questionnaires? Because it's a great achievement to get to 75%, but one always thinks, what else can be done?
Absolutely. So no, the other 25% disagree and grade us lower. And that's where we do our partnership work really comes in that engagement piece. We've done a lot of work with Community 360 and our IAG to understand why that 25% don't think they're getting a good or excellent service. And one of the areas I explored in particular, to give you an example, was there was a statistic that came out that said 53% of people surveyed don't feel confident if they made a complaint to police that it would be resolved impartially. When we dug down into that through our IAG and through our communities, that wasn't actually a concern about the police, it was a concern about the IOPC. But we will take that feedback on board. We had a really good discussion about, okay, so how do we engage better? How do we share the message that it is totally independent? How do we spread that news and dispel the rumours that it's mates investigate mates when clearly it isn't? And so that's where our CPT, our community policing team, are so important. And the further investment from Mr. Hurst has meant each area has 2 community safety engagement officers who specifically work with community members to explore new ways to engage and reach more people so that we can give the message. Because actually, crime's really low in Colchester, and my favourite phrase is Colchester's a really safe place to live, work or visit. But actually, the fear of crime is quite high in Colchester. So the key for us is to address the fear of crime by pumping out those good news messages. You know, crime is low. It's a really safe place to live. You can come into your town centre on a Saturday night and have a really nice time. In the last 3 weeks, on average, there's been between 8,000 and 10,000 people in our nighttime economy every weekend. There's been 2 assault incidents. that's a really low statistic. You're highly unlikely to be reported coming into the centre of Colchester. But where that crime occurs, it's really, really important that we understand the concerns of the victims, that we support them, that we give them the right message, and we give that message out to the wider community. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. And my second question, there has been bad news about the police at times. There have been 2 rogue officers who have got what they deserve and are now languishing in jail. And we hear word that police are going to be much more diligent in future in sorting out bad eggs or potential bad eggs within the force. Are you able to offer any words of reassurance of how that's going to happen and how we can be absolutely positive that every police officer in Colchester is a person of integrity working on behalf of the community and not a criminal in disguise?
So you will have all seen the recent publication of the HMIC report on vetting. I'll say now, Essex Police weren't part of that inspection. We have ours coming up shortly. And we have seen incredible investment from Mr. Hurst again in order to upskill our vetting department and increase the number of people working in our vetting department to ensure they can cope with the number of new recruits coming in and the expansion of the service. But I'll take you back to Sir Robert Peel when he formed the police service. The police are the community and the community are the police. And hand on heart, we cannot always say there won't be a bad person. We represent our communities. The people that choose to join the police do so because they have that public service mentality, that ethos to help others. There will always be people who are tempted to turn the other way. We can never 100% say that will not happen, but we have considerable investment in our counter-corruption unit, in our anti-corruption team, and our professional standards department. Our chief is very, very clear on our standards of conduct and has recently brought in a new professionalism strategy that revamps and puts that at the forefront of everyone's mind, along with the associated command and structure behind that. And we are very set as senior leaders. We're the role models for our officers. So we will live with integrity, we will uphold the highest level of ethics, and we will bring to bear on those officers that don't. And hopefully Mr. Hurst will come in at some point and back me up on that one.
Yes, as long as it's not too frequent. Roger, are you there?
I am here, and if I may, I will just very briefly come in and support the comments made there by Chief Inspector Huddleston. So, as you said, the report didn't cover Essex. I think the report itself was very shocking. And as Chief Inspector Huddleston has just said, we can't regard ourselves as perfect. I would say to you that I know the Chief Constable is very committed to ensuring that standards of behaviour and in Essex Police are high, that tolerance of officers with bad behaviour is very low. I know that he has terminated the employment of 16 officers in Essex Police this year alone on the grounds of conduct which was not acceptable. So he takes a very firm line. I commission the legally qualified chairs who chair the independent conduct boards which review the conduct of these people and come to the conclusions. It is, of course, the Chief Constable who is the employer and must make the decision as to what actually happens to them at the end of that. But there is a very robust process in place, and on a quarterly basis, I and my team scrutinise Essex Police for how well their standards department, the body which looks at the conduct of Essex Police officers, how well is it functioning, and we do some dip sampling to see how they've handled individual cases. I think the robustness of those processes are one reason why county-wide 80% of our residents have confidence in Essex Police, compared with under 60% having confidence in the Metropolitan Police just across the border of the M25. I don't feel smug about that. I want to see the Met get better. We have been working very closely with the Met, helping them work out how to get better. And I think that there will be further changes made in the Met now that Sir Mark Rowley is in charge and has committed very robustly to doing that. So this is an issue which is, I know, very important to the Chief Constable. I can assure you is very important to me. And I think, you know, there are many tests that you could put around it in terms of levels of confidence. For me, one of the big things that we have achieved in recent years with the massive increase in headcount, and of course to recruit 850 extra officers, you actually have to recruit more than 2,000 people, because they're over a period of 5 years, you will have natural turnover of people retiring and leaving. 40% of those have been women, 12% of them have been from our minority ethnic communities in the county. Our diversity has improved. That in itself is a way of changing the culture and changing the behaviour for the better across the piece. And I feel that that is in train. For me, the ultimate litmus test is going to be around rape and serious sexual assault and our success in supporting victims so that we can bring more perpetrators there to justice. At the moment, those figures are far too low. The cultural change we're in the process of will be visible, particularly in that trend.
Thank you. But I think the really key issue was the information we were given by Chief Inspector Huddleston about the staff that he had. You haven't got them at the moment. He had in regard to enforcing professional standards. That is extremely good to know that we have integrated into your team people who are ensuring that there is a high standard of integrity amongst the officers who are on the beat in Colchester. Mike, Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief Inspector Huddleston, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not actually going to challenge any of your figures as put up, but I do, excuse me for the voice, I do find it difficult to accept that there is a reduction of 53.7% in antisocial behaviour, whilst in no way we want or back a diminution in frontline services such as women and children, and particularly county lines and so on. The number of complaints I get on a weekly basis about low-level antisocial behaviour in my ward, which I know spreads over into the other adjoining wards, and in particular, teenagers gathering around play areas and moogers. And our big problem, which is a serious issue, is we all know what these are. I could pick a bucket of those up every day around my area. And now they're using the catering pack, nitrous oxide catering packs, along with lager, lager and vodka in particular, they've acquired from local shops, we should say. And these are teenagers, these are not in any way adults. So what you do, you get high on nitrous oxide and skins out of your head on vodka, and then you smash the vodka bottles all over the playground. And that happens week after week after week. So that is the priority on the ground for the residents that I represent, and Councillor Tudor and Councillor Smith, because that's the complaints we get. And sometimes we've had good backup. We've had visits from your lads, and in particular from our community support officer. But I honestly do believe that soon we're going to have a death of a teenager. Somebody's going to find one laying under some play equipment at the Mooga, who's gone high on the nitrous oxide, mixed it with vodka, and it slipped away. So I'm not challenging the figure of a 53.7%. If you say that's what diminution in the figures, if that's what you say it is, then I accept that. But that isn't how it's viewed by my residents on the estates where I represent.
Councillor, you raise a really good point, and that's where the work we do with the licensing team is really, really important to stop those young people having access to alcohol. the access to those little capsules and the effects on young people of those. I don't know whether any of you saw the news a couple of weeks back where they interviewed a young lady who's paralysed as a result of her continuous use of that and had an effect. And yes, I agree. I don't doubt at some point we will see a death. We need to get some legislation in place to prevent the sale of those items unless they're licensed and the person buying them is licensed. Really, really difficult. Please encourage your residents to report to us online. Only by getting those reports coming on a regular basis do we get the information. And I know from previous conversations we've had, and I've had with Councillor Lilly, you get an awful lot of reports that we never see, because people complain quite vehemently on social media or to you about the broken glass and the O2 canisters. They never tell us about it. You know, and one of the things we've introduced around our engagement is Stroll with the Patrol, to encourage more residents, and we publicise those really well in advance. Please encourage residents to come out and talk to us when we're in your area for that Stroll with the Patrol. Get them to come out and spend 10 minutes walking around and tell our officers where they want them to be patrolling and what the local issues are. Because again, it's another way we can get that information. Once we know about it, we can do something about it. And often that has to be in partnership. And as you'll see from some of the ASB we've addressed that I'll talk through on one of the slides, sometimes that's a longer term solution needs to be put in place rather than a quick fix. But please encourage people to report to us.
If I can come back, Chairman, I appreciate that. Could I ask that if there isn't already work going on through the schools, through the senior schools,
so there's work going on at both junior and senior school level, and not only by us, but through the PFCC funded education team, which is a joint fire and police education team. And we are delivering lessons across a range of subjects, from safer relationships to ensure that we, you know, grow responsible citizens who believe from an early age that domestic abuse is not acceptable, through to drug awareness, through to the dangers of knife crime, through to county lines, and obviously that includes those as well.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask Mel, we were discussing earlier on the scope of the partnership with some 20 or so other organisations. I see the schools, education per se is not listed as one of the schools, or one of the organisational or umbrella organisations which are in the partnership. Is that intentional?
We do have a representative, and I will pass to Sonia. I can't remember the name of the specific organisation, but we have someone who represents all of the secondary schools across Colchester. What's it called?
It's the North East Association of Secondary Head Teachers, and they're represented. And we follow that up with a further meeting with them on a quarterly basis. They're one of the smaller organisations that sit in there. But our links into schools are from our children's and young persons officers, working through children's social care as well, and in partnership with youth offending teams. So the schools are really well covered. Our intelligence flow out of schools is really good. Support from the heads is really effective.
Councillor Lissimore.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming here tonight. It's very interesting. One tale I tell many times, and it was about 15 years ago, so it was before social media was as popular as it is now. I happened to be at a conference and spoke to, I think he was sort of like, I don't know, Deputy Commissioner of Warwickshire Police or something. And I said to him, the biggest complaint we get from residents is they don't see the police. And he said, good. And I was astounded. He said, good. And I said, why do you say that? He said, because you obviously live in a low crime area. We send officers where they are needed. And I have never forgotten that. And I have repeated that many, many times. However, as you've mentioned, we do have this disparity between real crime and the fear of crime. How do you see going onwards? You've mentioned social media. How do you see going onwards how we can improve, lessen that gap? And also, where do you see the role of particularly, I've mentioned specials, but particularly PCSOs in all this? Because we did use them very well. I do not live in a parished area, so I am not able to ask a parish council to employ a PCSO. But how do you see the role of PCSOs moving forward?
So firstly, on the visibility of police officers, it's something that I'm often challenged on. We never see a police officer, and it was really interesting. A wee tale. I was with a Radio 2 journalist in the centre of Tiptree, talking about visible policing in Tiptree. It's two PCSOs walked down the road past us completely randomly and set it up, I promise. And an elderly gentleman walked the other way and walked past both PCSOs, who both said hello to him. And he was stopped by the radio journalist and said, "Do you ever see the police in this area?" And he said, "Never." And I said, "But you've just seen two of them." And the conversation I had with him, I said to him, "How long have you lived in your road?" And he said, "Well, I've lived there 50 years. I said, "So have you ever been a victim of crime?" And he said, "No." I said, "Have your neighbours ever been a victim of crime?" He said, "No." I said, "When you sit at home, do you look out your front window all day?" "No." I said, "So if I was sat outside your house, you wouldn't know anyway." And that's the big issue we have to overcome. We also have to get across the message that actually, whilst putting my police officers into identified crime hotspots for 15 minutes in any 24-hour period reduces the crime for the following 24 hours, actually putting a police officer to walk round Dedham at 3 o'clock in the morning is an absolute waste of resources. And there are more threats out there than will be solved by a police officer walking around. You are more likely to become a victim of crime whilst you're surfing the internet than actually walking down your road. So we have to have those dedicated resources. But that's where we need to be clever with our use of technology. We need to be smarter with our engagement. We need to be reaching a wider audience. And over the last 3 years, we've seen our engagement go up by just over 150%. At one stage, our monthly newsletter was reaching about 60,000 people, which I think is really worthwhile. It's been adopted by the rest of the force and is now weekly, and you can sign up to that through the website. It lets you know what we're doing, where we are, why we're doing it, and upcoming events that you can participate in. But what I see as the role of our PCSOs is very much that Bobby on the beat. They are the eyes and ears on the ground. They are the people that are out there, that are visible, that are a deterrent to those that want to offend, but actually are there for our community to talk to. And we see their effectiveness through the Coffee with Cops programme we've got on, through the work they do with the libraries, through the joint partnership work we do with our fire brigade, meeting up with residents. And this is all about us having as much contact as possible with our residents and giving them the good news. But a greater endorsement than us doing it is you doing it. And what we're working on, and what Colin, Chief Inspector Colin Cox will take forward, and just to reassure you, Colin is in post. So Colin's been in post since the 31st of October. He is our night duty operational officer tonight, otherwise he would have come along and joined me here to meet you all. But what we are doing is looking at how we can engage better and how we can give you as councillors more detailed data down to your ward. So at the moment, it's really difficult to give you, there were, I don't know, 3 theft of motor vehicles in Highwoods in the last 24 hours, and they were all theft of tools from vans. And we've solved them and we've caught the person. So that when somebody then rings, "Oh, there's loads of motor vehicle theft," you've got data there immediately to go, "Well, yeah, we know that, but they caught the person and they've charged them for it." And it's about that third party. The greatest endorsement policing ever gets is when our councillors, when our local press, when the partners we work with tell people we're doing a good job. That really reduces the fear of crime. The police telling people we do a good job, people just say, "Well, you're going to say that, aren't you?" But it's really about our councillors and our partners going out there and going, "Actually, Colchester's a safe place. It's a really good place to live, work and visit. Come to Colchester, live here. It's great." All good.
Thank you. You mentioned Dedham there, and it's an area that I represent. I represent Rural Ward North that has the River Stour throughout it. That has had some increased challenges lately with the heat, and obviously with the lockdowns and people discovering these riverside communities and what they have to offer. So I wondered if you could give us an insight into how you've experienced and how you intend to manage some of the obvious ASB that comes around, particularly in the holiday period. No doubt when many of us are having our holidays, many of your officers are having their holidays. How do we manage that situation? And also, how do we manage it where we have the border? And it's an artificial one, in some places, but I represent the quieter side of viewers, but I understand there's a noisier side, and the side of Dedham that gets a bit lively is in Suffolk. So how does Essex Police work with Suffolk to manage all of that, to reassure our residents that where there is the occasional hijinks that goes too far, resulting in the canisters that Councillor Hogg references and feeding cows cider and stuff? How do we deal with that? Because it does matter.
Absolutely. And let me reassure you, there is really close cooperation between us and Suffolk. One of the pieces of work we're doing at the moment involves both the community policing teams either side of the border and tendering, joining up to address those problems in a more holistic view, rather than independently and keep pushing it across the border and back again. It's about doing that together, but equally it's about our wider policing teams, and I'm sure you're all aware that Colchester is not just policed by the response team and the community policing team based at Colchester. It's policed by the county-wide road policing unit, our operational support group. Many of you will see our BMW X5s driving around. They're our armed units. They are up here an awful lot. And we make sure we spread our resources around the counties. Colchester is one of our biggest cities, and so obviously it gets a lot of attention from our resources. And on any given day, I know that I've got more than just my local resources to call upon here. In terms of some of the specific issues, yes, we've seen a massive influx in UK tourism. We hear it from Dedham, we hear it from Mersey. People who have lived in very quiet villages that are beautiful and picturesque are suddenly inundated with people causing parking nuisance, litter and all the others. And again, that's where as a safety partnership, we talk with the North East Parking Partnership, we look at park rangers, we look at Suffolk Police, we look at our PCSOs to provide that visible presence. And unfortunately, what we've seen since COVID is a drop in tolerance. We saw it at the launch of the nighttime economy, and we've seen it very much. People have become very parochial about their own area and don't want anyone else there. And that has exasperated some of that reporting. But where we've had those reports, we've looked into it and dealt with it, and we've got really solid cross-border information sharing.
Councillor Scordis.
Thank you, Chair. So we talked about reporting and crime, and not all crime is reported, which is an issue. Say people moan on social media or just amongst neighbours, but no one actually reports the issue. Do you think that may be an aspect of a lack of trust in the police to get things done, rather than national issues that we've seen? And is there also an issue with the 101 line where sometimes it can take too long and people think, what's the point?
Yeah, Councillor Scordis, I do agree. Trust in the police is a huge challenge, and it's our job. And it goes back to what I was saying about that third party endorsement, as us and the partnership promoting that actually have confidence in the police across our communities, will encourage people to come forward and report. And I can give you an example of one particular night around 18 months ago, where along the Harwich Road, there were 9 shed burglaries. I only found that out because the councillor called me and said, my residents are up in arms. There's been 9 shed burglaries and nobody's attended. Nobody actually called us at all. They all spoke to each other and said, has somebody called the police? I went, yeah, bound to have done, but nobody actually took the trouble.
I hasten to add, Chief Inspector, it wasn't me that phoned you.
No, it wasn't. But really, really important, we drive that message home. 101 does have its challenges, absolutely. And our head of contact management command, Chief Superintendent Stuart Hooper, has put in place a massive process to support that. But 101 is only one option for reporting. We've got a massive investment in online reporting that you can go into and report a crime in seconds. So we've launched across the summer a big publicity campaign across the whole of Essex, on social media, through our newsletters, poster campaigns around the ways to contact Essex Police and what to contact us for. I can tell you stories of 999 being used because the pizza delivery boys deliver the wrong pizza. So we need to stop people abusing the systems. But equally, we need to encourage the number of calls we get into 101 asking questions that actually you could answer if you type the question into our website. And we know there is an argument that there are a percentage of our population that don't have access to the internet, but that is really small now. You know, my father turned 84 today. And he's sending me text messages to say, can you order this online on Amazon for me? So our tech savvy's got a lot better. Yes, there will be a core that needs to use 101, but actually, if you want to report a crime, the fastest way to do it is online. Go onto our website, report a crime, type in your postcode and put in your details. That'll be recording. You'll have a reference number really quickly. And then, but what we need to also do is understand crime investigation. Why do we need a police officer to attend a crime if there is no hope of solving it? So if you wake up in the morning and your shed is broken into and your lawnmower has been stolen, there are unlikely to be any fingerprints. There's unlikely to be CCTV. It's unlikely your neighbours have seen it. What value will a police officer getting in a car and driving out to see you add? It won't. What you need is that crime reference number for your insurance company. So we have introduced a triage system where we look at, are there investigative opportunities? Can we actually find the person responsible and bring them to justice for you? Have they caused harm to somebody? Is there likely to be more harm? Yeah, then we need to get a police officer out to you. Are you vulnerable? Is there any support? Going back to that prevent message, that vulnerability message, do we need to intervene? Do we need to put some support around you to ensure you're not a victim of crime again? But we understand that people want that reassurance of a police officer knocking on the door. So one of the things we're starting to trial in Colchester is that those crimes that are reported, so you've come out in the morning and the tools have been stolen out your van and none of your neighbours have got CCTV and it was parked down a really dark alleyway, there's no chance that there's any marks on it because you know you've checked it. There'll be a PCSO come out and speak to you and give you some crime prevention advice and give you those referrals. But our online team who are taking those crime reports have the ability to talk to you through email, through live chat, to send you all the stuff you'd need for victim support, to refer you to the right support. So do you actually need a police officer to come to your door, or could that police officer be better utilised somewhere else? But as I say, in Colchester, we're looking at how we use our PCSOs for that reassurance piece, because that's often what it is. The person wants somebody in uniform to knock on their door and have that cup of tea and provide that reassurance, isn't it? And that's why we're all here. So if we can use our PCSOs for that, we can keep our officers deployed to those real emergencies and those ones that really need a police officer to be investigating it. So.
And just on that, Joe, I'm glad to hear that as well, because I think that comes back to the trust issue. One email I had from a few years ago was about a shed burglary, and he said there's footprints, there might be fingerprints, and no one called me back, no one turned up, I just got a letter. And obviously they felt quite peeved and had lost trust in the police. So I think that is important, and that's a good role for PCSOs, is building that bridge, is being a link of comms, might swap numbers, so if they see a crime go on and so forth. I'm also wondering as well, with burglaries, do we still drop a letter through doors in the neighbourhood to say, did you see anything at this time? This is when we believe a burglary was in your area. Because I remember seeing something similar when I lived out in the country in probably 2006, years ago now. But still wondering if we do that. So people, and technology's moved on, so people have Ring doorbells and so forth, and they may just see someone scouting out a house and not assumed anything, but then it recollects. So wondering if we do still do that, because I think that again builds that trust, shows the police are taking an interest.
Yep. So ideally, when we get a report of a dwelling burglary, we send one of my new officers now, my CID officers, to it. So they will be in plain clothes, in a plain car, so neighbours won't necessarily notice. They'll meet the homeowner. They'll take a statement. They'll understand what's been stolen, what's been broken into. We'll deploy a scenes of crime officer there as well to do an analysis and look for any kind of forensic evidence we can pick. Really key, and I'm glad you've touched on it, is the Ring and other brands of video doorbell that are available out there. So it's not to promote one, but that video doorbell scoping is really, really key for us. So we try and physically speak to the neighbours who overlook and are within earshot of that specific location. But where they're not in, we will obviously leave a note for them because we want them to then review that video footage and give us a call and say, we've got it. And Mr. Hurst mentioned our digital asset management system. Rather than now having that neighbour phone us up and say, yeah, I've got doorbell footage, do you want me to burn it to a disk, etc. Don't need to do that anymore. We can email them a link, they can log in and upload that footage straight away to us, which is then electronically viewable by us as well. Works really, really well. It's an amazing system. So yeah, we definitely do that house to house.
Any more questions at this stage? It looks as though we've got to the end of the line.
So we're on to the main presentation.
Yes, well, I think the strategic assessment is of significant importance. Good that we spent some time on it. So members have got no more questions. It's break time. It's after 1930s now, 1940. Can we recommence at 1945? Right, I think we're all seated comfortably again. We're now moving on to the consideration of the three principal priorities. We want to hear what they are, and we need to assure ourselves that they are correctly chosen. It's going to be difficult to say they're not correctly chosen in that they interlock with the county-wide police priorities, but nevertheless, it's our duty to hear them and question them and assure ourselves that that they are indeed the appropriate priorities. The first one is tackling organised crime, gangs, county lines, an emphasis on drug trafficking. In your hands.
So we will get the slides up for you. It should be slide number 7.
Is it that one?
Yeah, sorry, slide number 6. No, up 1. Keep now. That's priority 2. Keep going. Keep going. Backwards. No, you need to go backwards towards the front. Sorry. If you scroll down from that one. There we go. Right. So we're talking about tackling organised crime, gangs and county lines with that focus on drug trafficking, and in particular that focus on the drug-driven violence around that trade in drug trafficking, not only violence towards those vulnerable users, but those vulnerable people who are cuckooed, and the violence between the gangs and the county lines that to enforce their territory, so to speak. We've got a really established structure within the force, and this is an area that's really dear to my heart as I brought it into the force across Essex and Kent many years ago when I sat in our level 2 intelligence team. So all of our organised crime groups are owned by our district commanders, no matter which tactics we're applying to them. And that enables us to give a much wider view to attack those groups, because it means we can bring together our visible police in our community policing team, our detectives in our CID areas, and our wider force support, all coordinated together to disrupt those individuals who take part in that criminality. The theory being that if we disrupt them enough, so busy worrying about us, they haven't got time to do their criminal trade. And that's not something we do alone as police officers. And Colchester, I'm really proud to say, was the first to introduce the multi-agency coordination panel, where any partner from our community safety partnership can nominate a person to be discussed. We'll share their details across all our agencies, and all of the agencies come together and look at what powers they can bring to bear against that individual. That works really well when we work under 4 key headings: prevent, protect, pursue and prepare. Prevention is what it says on the tin. It's about preventing those criminals having the opportunity to undertake their trade, and it's about preventing people becoming victims. Protect is about protecting our wider community, and the work we've talked about earlier that we've undertaken in schools, warning children of the dangers of county lines. It's about getting into those vulnerable people who may become victims. It's about the relentless pursuit of the criminals, and it's about preparing ourselves as agencies and our town when we look at our design and the way we're delivering our city and our growth to ensure that we maximise our opportunity to disrupt these criminals. In Colchester, over the last 12 months, we've targeted several groups. The first one was a homegrown group. It was a mother and 2 sons who decided that it would be a really good idea to grow cannabis and to bake cannabis edibles and sell them to school children. They were arrested. We've frozen over £40,000 of their assets, and in court last week, the 2 sons were given prison sentences, and the mum was given a suspended sentence and some quite strict controls. We also targeted a wider group. They were somebody we'd mapped and scored over the last 2.5 years. And we had nibbled at their sides and taken out some of their periphery members. But over the last 12 months, we pulled together a range of tactics that have resulted in 2 big strike days that you'd have seen in the local news, with the 5 principal members being charged and remanded with being concerned in the supply of Class A drugs, and 7 others imprisoned. Not only have we secured conspiracy charges against them, we've recovered quite a quantity of Class A drugs, cash, and we are looking at seizing assets from them. In partnership, and we did this in partnership with our Serious Violence Unit, which is another unit that's come about thanks to the investment in the Force Growth. The Serious Violence Unit is set up under our Operational Policing Command and allows specialist detectives to focus on those who cause the most harm through drug supply. And what that has meant is a change in tactics. So where before locally here in Colchester, we were undertaking stop search and taking out street dealers, now we've got the ability to target their phones, and we can take out the entire line from the person sitting in London holding the line phone all the way through to the street dealers. And we can identify the properties they're spending nights in and protect the vulnerable people within those properties. In the last 12 months, we've investigated 27 county lines linked to Colchester and taken enforcement action against 26 of those. We've currently got 12 identified active lines connected to Colchester. They're not all operating and delivering drugs in Colchester at this stage, but we know that they are passing through. We've seized approximately £40,000 from those gangs and over £13,000 worth of drugs. In partnership with our Serious Violence Unit is our Violence and Vulnerability Unit, and this is really key. This is about identifying those vulnerable people who are being exploited and about safeguarding them using a range of legislation, such as the Modern Slavery Human Trafficking Act. And you'll have noted on the news recently where that act has been discussed, that over 80% of victims in the UK are British children who are being exploited by county lines. So that Violence and Vulnerability Unit, along with the Joint Education Team, spend a lot of time in schools, and we start really early. We're starting at primary school, KS1, under the People Who Help You syllabus, to build that trust in policing, through to year 6, where we're getting the children to undertake their own investigation. We go in and we give them a missing person investigation. They become the investigators. That bridges then that gap into year 7, 8 and 9, where they're at senior school, where they're starting to be exposed more to those people and that culture on social media that looks cool, the kind of hoodies and the music and that lifestyle. And we ensure that they're getting that understanding of the dangers that presents to them. Working really closely with social care colleagues and housing colleagues around those vulnerable children and those vulnerable adults to ensure that they don't get embroiled into that and that they're not exploited in their own homes. And we've seen significant work in partnership with Nathan and the team around disruption of that supply and closure orders. But key to us is establishing that intelligence picture. Serious organised crime and a serious organised crime group is defined as 2 or more people with the ability to commit ongoing serious crime on a regular basis. And so it's really important that our intelligence teams are out looking at what we've got, speaking to members of the community, speaking to members of the criminal fraternity, and understanding what that picture looks like. Those officers you won't see. They're out in plain clothes. We call them field intelligence officers, but they're out on the ground. We're currently in Colchester looking at 3 further potential organised crime groups that are looking to fill the gap left by the one we've dismantled. And we're already setting up processes to take action against them and prevent them getting that foothold. The mapping identification piece of work is done through our regional organised crime units, and this is where the support into our city comes. So whilst we have our community policing team out on the ground, knowing our local people, we've actually got partnership with our Serious Crime Directorate and our serious organised crime teams Our level 1 intelligence teams based locally and level 2 intelligence teams based in our Serious Crime Directorate and our Eastern Region Serious Organised Crime Unit are all focused on those criminals that are operating cross-border and may be coming into Colchester. So we can bring them to the attention for our Community Safety Partnership and our multi-agency coordination panel of the other agencies in Colchester, the DWP, housing. You know, in one case, we've used the Environment Agency to disrupt some criminality. So it's really, really important we've got access to that wide range of partners to join our powers together. There are hundreds of powers of entry in the UK to your home. The police hold about 4 or 5 of them, and most of those require to go and get a warrant from a magistrate's court. Other partners can get access to your home a lot easier. And so we can use those partners' powers because they can take along a police officer for their own safety. And we can use that for intelligence gathering and disruption. And if you're a criminal that's trying to supply Class A into Colchester, what you don't want is a consistent troop of partnerships knocking on your door and coming into your home, because you never know when one of them's going to bring a police officer with them and take away all your product. So I'm really proud to say the work that the Community Safety Partnership has done here and that development of multi-agency coordination panels now been rolled out across Essex, and most of our big teams have those. And we are scrutinised on a regular basis within Essex Police. Every district attends a serious organised crime board chaired by a detective superintendent, where the district commanders are held to account for the plans they've put in place to disrupt organised crime. The DCIs are held to account for the investigative pursue element and the number of criminals they're bringing to justice, and where we share that best practice and that learning. That SOC board feeds into a wider force serious organised crime board that then feeds into a regional and national crime board. So we're ensuring that we're really joined up, and you'll all be aware of the work done over the last 24 months by the NCA with the disruption of something called EncroChat, which was encoded mobile phones, which has led to arrests not only across Essex, but the Metropolitan Police and wider as well. So it's ensuring we've got that link from national, and the policy is called local to global. That was the Home Office strategy around the disruption of organised crime. And that local piece is the real fundamental key. Having that big pool of experts we can fish in our Community Safety Partnership to disrupt criminals from as many angles as we can. And I like to think we've done that fairly successfully with the few examples I've just given you. Moving on to the next slide, if we can, please. Which is going to talk about, I've touched upon a bit. So let me just expand on our Violence and Vulnerability Unit. So our Violence and Vulnerability Unit has access to a wider range of funding and a wider set of experts than just our local Community Safety Partnership. So we have ex-gang members who have set up charities to keep children away from gangs. And we're able to use them as one example where we get young people identified who we can see really early on the fringes of this. We can refer them in for our Violence and Vulnerability Unit and ensure that they are moved away and given something else to do. And you'll have all heard, hopefully, of MACE, the multi-agency child exploitation panels. When vulnerable children get to a certain level of risk, they'll be heard at a multi-agency child exploitation panel. But what we identified in Colchester was that risk's quite a high risk. What happens to all those children that haven't actually quite made that we're starting to see going missing, either missing from care or missing from their own homes? So we've set up a pre-MACE and working in conjunction with the North East Association of Secondary Head Teachers. We've now got a referral mechanism in place where when school safeguard officers and when teachers in secondary schools recognise those early indicators, that child has suddenly got the latest trainers, the latest coat, the latest iPhone, and they know that they're getting free school meals and they don't have that coming from the home. When they're hanging out with a new group of friends, those are our early warning markers. And our education partners are really switched on to that and are able to refer those into us. We've set up with Children's Social Care, with other partners from the Safer Colchester Partnership, a meeting where we can discuss those children and look at localised support and referrals. And you know, one example, a young man, we'd started to see him go missing quite a lot on a regular basis, wouldn't tell us where he was, but had new trainers, had a new coat. And so we did some work through our CYP in the schools, and through our partnership. Violence and Vulnerability Unit gave us some funding, the Safer Colchester Partnership gave us some funding, and Colchester United brought him into their programme for talented youth. He is an incredibly good footballer. But in return for him going to football training and us paying for a taxi to get him there, he's had to sign a behaviour contract with Colchester United to say he won't get involved in criminality. And that gives him the out, because often these children can't say no to the people trying to exploit them. But when they can say, no, I can't, because if I do, I lose this, they've got that strength, and that's what that's about. So that Violence and Vulnerability Unit giving us that wider access is really, really key. Some of the initiatives they're looking at, don't know if you've heard of a charity called Red Thread. They call them learning moments. When young people have been stabbed and they're in intensive care, as they come round, Red Thread, the charity, are there to talk to them about the dangers. And it's that epiphany moment. So Violence and Vulnerability Unit are working with charities such as that, who are operating exclusively in London at the moment, see if we can bring them into the county too. Our partnership with schools is so key. It's that primary to secondary education. It's that early recognition. It's about working with missing as well. And again, through investment from Mr. Hurst, we've got now a strategic coordination of missing, and we're starting to be able to recognise those behaviours and refer those young people who previously just wouldn't talk to us because we were uniformed officers. We've now got access to refer them to a partner to do that return from missing interview. And actually, we're finding young people are opening up more to non-police, but we still get the intelligence in and can act on that intelligence. And then final bit I'll touch on here is Op Luscombe. We were the pioneers of Op Luscombe in Essex. It was originally to address our street homeless. It's a 3-strike and our aggressive begging, a 3 strikes and you're out rule. It's no good enforcing against street homeless and aggressive begging if we can't support people. And we know from going out with the teams that map homeless people, I went out one night in Chelmsford, 100% of homeless people have been approached to be exploited. So we need to protect them. So Op Luscombe delivers a one-stop shop for our homeless people. They'll be offered the opportunity to come into the Op Luscombe at the hub at Longwire Street. And there they can get health support, they can get alcohol support, they can get benefit support, they can get housing support. And if they want to, they can talk to us about any concerns they've got. Rather than going to a housing appointment one day and then 3 days later, you might get your social care appointment, and a week after that, this is a one-stop shop. But if they choose not to engage, we'll start taking the enforcement action against them to prevent that antisocial behaviour, to prevent that street violence, and to prevent them being exploited. That's the presentation. Any questions on priority 1?
I have an immediate question on the resources to address the gangs and county lines and so on. A difficult area of ethnicity, but does your force have a sufficiently wide ethnic section to be able to effectively deal with the range of ethnicity of the criminals, if I put it that way? Because there needs to be a degree of match for you to carry out effective investigation.
So we have access to the necessary resources to implement certain tactics if we need to, be that overt or covert. You heard Mr. Hurst earlier say how we are broadening our diversity, and we still have some ways to go to be representative of our communities, and that is really high on our agenda as a force to increase that diverse representation. We have spent a lot of time training our officers to ensure that when they use their proactive stop search powers, they do so ethically and lawfully. And I'm really pleased to say that the feedback from our IAG, when we've had discussions, because at our independent advisory group, we present on our stop search statistics every quarter, and we break that down by ethnicity, sex, age, etc. And it's really reassuring that we've got the confidence of our community in using that stop search power, and actually we're asked to use it more. So that's a real positive. In terms of our expertise, our serious violence unit's been funded through the Uplift police programme that you've heard Mr. Hurst speak about. The teams there are experienced detectives taken from a range of backgrounds, and co-joined with the violence and vulnerability unit. There's a mix of officers and staff from various safeguarding backgrounds. And through those and our partnership with Metropolitan Police, who are the lead in the country on gangs and county lines, and the tactics that they've implemented that we've now adopted and received support for, we're seeing considerable gains in our progress against them.
Not a question, but there is a question at the start, and that's also been very successful in dealing with drug gangs over the last few years. I think if you remember 5 years ago, there was a gang of Scousers, I believe. If you remember those people, was finding people down here to imitate a Scouse accent to infiltrate, be different. But we've come an awful long way in dealing with that, and it's been very successful. And I think that it goes back to the partnership working on the amount of people in that organisation, that when people who are vulnerable, they are able to go to an agency that's sitting in there and they help straight away. The question is, when we catch them, and we catch them a lot, and they have their phones and they're decoded by your experts, what news is there where it goes back along the line into where they originate from their it's like an army, I believe. It's like a general or a colonel that's involved. Is there any, do we go all the way back down to that line? And is it possible for us to have an update really over a few years? How many leaders have been taken down? And the sad thing is they are quite replaced, aren't they, by other people, and they come back. So that's the good one. But the other one is, and Roger will know this one through the crime panel again, is an issue one. But it does come up, and whether we've been tackling the county lines now for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Is there a point where we've reached the stage where it isn't a priority, and have we got our priorities right? And I think this is delving into Chief Constable territory, but his priority, you have to follow his policy. But I have to admit, we've been really good in that, and I would like a swapping of the priorities. If I'm selfish enough for Colchester, and that priority 2 would be priority 1, and then it's good news that it's slipping down, but we can't keep going forever and forever, spending the amount of resources it takes on doing that. But it's just an observation which we'd like to see. I mean, the work that's been done is fantastic. And the story of the kid winning the football is a great story and involvement in there. But and I think that credit where credit is due. Roger will probably faint. Roger has backed up Colchester with funding for us over the years, and where we were 5 years ago with the aggressive begging, with all those gangs operating in Colchester, we shouldn't really complain that much of where we are now, because it is so much better. And Operation Lumberscum was brought in on stuff like that. People still moan about Colchester. Oh, there's loads of aggressive beggars everywhere. I pop out, have a wander around. Well, they're either hiding or I never see them. And I think that's probably just a fallacy. You'll never stop it completely because it's a way of life and always will be. But we are so proud in Colchester with all the work that we've done over the years. But I just would like a switching of the two, really. Thanks.
So, Mike, thank you. First of all, just because they're numbered priority 1, 2 and 3. They're not sequential. They're all equal priority for us as a safety partnership. First of all, when I talk about county lines being taken down, that's end to end. That's the person holding the phone at the top end to the street dealers here. And as I say, that's 27 in the last 12 months. And that was a big change in tactic in the last probably 2 to 3 years, because before we didn't understand the technology enough to be able to do that. Whereas now, whilst it takes us slightly longer to take down a line, it's more effective to take the person holding the phone in the ivory tower to the street dealers than it is just to keep chopping the head off the snake, so to speak. But in terms of our priorities, you know, what we've seen over the setting of the Mr. Hurst plan and the Chiefs plan, it's about violence, vulnerability and victims. And I'll talk about those 3 priorities. And actually tackling gangs and county lines remains a priority, and tackling organised crime groups because they exploit vulnerable people. And when we talk about exploitation of vulnerable people, we're not just talking about people forced into criminality. We're actually talking about people who've got perhaps mental health issues or other issues, and they are tempted to go down that path of using drugs. And somebody's there going, go on then, have some, feel free, have some, now you're in debt to me. And we need to, you know, one of the key pieces of work of the Serious Violence Unit and the Violence and Vulnerability Unit is looking at that preventative approach about how can we stop there being a market for drugs? Because if we can stop there being a market for drugs, we don't have county lines and organised crime groups bringing them in because there's no profit for it. And we also have to be very aware, though, that, you know, as we cut off those profits, other types of crime emerge, you know, and we saw in 2015 the launch of the Modern Slavery Human Trafficking Act. That's a really powerful piece of legislation that we can use against drug gangs, because when they bring that 14-year-old down the A12 in a car to deal drugs, they're moving somebody for the purpose of exploitation. So we can look to prosecute them under the Modern Slavery Act as well as conspiracies by Class A, hopefully resulting in longer sentencing for them.
So your clear advice is that the work being done under priority 1 should continue as one of the most important aspects of the partnership's work.
Absolutely, Councillor. You know, we've heard it described on the national news in the last few days that county lines is a critical issue nationally, and as we go into that kind of wider recession and the fears that everyone has around rising costs, a lot of young people are seeing this as an easy way to make money without being aware of the dangers it presents to them. So now it's more important than ever that we really invest in that prevent strand, that we really work with those young people, enable them to make good choices so they don't become exploited.
Councillor Laws.
I'm just intrigued to know how drugs get here. I mean, is it the car down the A12? Is it the train? Is it a boat up from the east and an exchange in the river? But the other point I wanted to ask and see if you agree, isn't actually the kindest thing to go up to that 14-year-old, and if you've got a suspicion, to stop and search them, and to if they've got a knife or a drug on them. I mean, that is the kindest thing, is to actually to intervene, isn't it? And do you feel that officers have the cover to do that now? I mean, I know we've been through a challenging time, particularly in London, but you know, do officers, if they have a suspicion, do they feel confident to stop and search someone, regardless of what they look like or the colour of their skin?
Yep. So we've invested heavily in making sure officers have that confidence. We run locally a stop and search scrutiny panel, where we have a member of our IAG, so a member from the community comes in, some stop searches are picked at random, the body worn video is watched, and the stop search is scrutinised. And so far, the only feedback to officers has been positive. And so we make a really big thing about publicising that positive feedback internally, so officers have that confidence. But stop search is a double-edged sword. For those poor young people that we stop, who are carrying drugs, who are being exploited, when they come out of our custody with us having confiscated the drugs, they then owe the drug gang that money. So we're never going to stop searching, and we're never going to stop taking those drugs off those young people. But a key part of our world now is around how do we safeguard that young person when we release them from our custody. And that's where the violence and vulnerability unit is really pushing the boundaries and really giving us that expertise to be able to look after those young people, because actually they're victims. You know, I've sat in an interview with a 15-year-old child who, she didn't know what the drugs were, she didn't know the street name for them, she didn't know the value, she didn't know where she was going, but she maintained all the way through that interview they were hers. She was found in a car with 3 rather large, nasty gang members with records as long as your arm. That child was a victim of exploitation, and those 3 were human traffickers. And so that's how we progressed with it. And we ensured that when we rehomed her, we rehomed her a long, long way away from those people's reach, and looked after her. And, you know, we're seeing this wider investment. And I'll mention Justice Care, a charity really dear to my heart, because my wife's one of the directors. But actually they've invested, and within our violence and vulnerability and serious violence unit is a victim navigator who is there to provide support for those child victims. And give them somebody to talk to who's not a police officer, who understands their predicament, and will give them that support. And that's where the partnerships are invaluable, to be able to bring those wider partners in to gain those young people's trust, because they'd have been told by all the criminals, don't trust the police, they're bad for you. But actually the partnership can bring in a different aspect to them and can offer them different opportunities. And that's where we really need that focus, that real prevent piece. And in terms of how stuff's brought in, yes, we see it transported by road networks, rail networks, aircraft, boats, you name it, and ever evolving innovative ideas for hiding it, as well as around and inside your personage. And you know, we try and again, part of the serious violence unit and our intel units research that. And you may have seen on social media videos, you can now buy bottles of fizzy drink. They're 2-litre bottles, but they're actually a safe. You can unscrew them and take them apart, and in the middle is a hidey hole. So, of course, that can be used for criminality. So it's about staying on top and that continuous development, so that we're aware of what's going on and what's out there, and making sure that when we search, we are effective in the way we do that search. But it's the key for me is the safeguarding piece around those exploited young people, making them aware of the dangers they face and making sure that those dangers don't come to fruition for them.
Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, Commissioner Hurst has his hand raised.
Oh, right. Commissioner Hurst.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can just come in with a question. Probably one more for the council officers involved in the partnership rather than for the Chief Inspector. I mean, I'm a real supporter of partnership working across the piece. Obviously, that's why I fund the Community Safety Partnership in the way I do. We've heard a lot about the policing involvement, and obviously that's something I'm very familiar with. I'd be really interested in hearing a bit more about how, in terms of busting county lines, how are we using our knowledge of housing and our housing tenants? How are we using our knowledge of our licensed premises partners? Are they pulling their weight in terms of safeguarding? Are they providing safe space for potential victims of drugs in the nighttime economy? Are they giving us the intel that we need to make sure that we're dealing with people? Or are we needing to do more in that space? And what about the kind of youth work? I know it's not specifically Colchester City, it's probably what you do in partnership with the county, but particularly around your youth strategy and working together with social care in terms of them sharing information with you about individuals that need safeguarding. Could we just hear a bit more about that, please?
Certainly.
So I'll answer that on behalf of the partnership, if that's okay, and address the points as you raised them. So in terms of working with housing, and I've got Nathan sat next to me who will no doubt chip in, we work really, really closely with housing, who take the lead in terms of the powers they have around closure orders, etc., and the publication of those afterwards as well. And we make sure, don't we, we have a real joined up publicity piece afterwards. And they are an intrinsic part of our multi-agency coordination panel. really, really important, the information they give us around tenants, especially people who are coming into the area as tenants who present risk. So we can start looking at them early as a partnership. And that extends wider. The organised crime group we've just dismantled, they were using 2 particular licensed premises to deal their Class A and have their criminal meetings at, and our wider Colchester Borough licensing team achieved closure orders for both of those in conjunction with our enforcement action as well, and has since maintained and changed the licensing conditions around those premises. And I'm regularly updated on the checks they're doing and the passing of intelligence, which is invaluable to us. You know, in one example, somebody associated with one of the new licensees offered a mobile phone number to our licensing team, who promptly passed it to us, and we linked that back to further criminality with somebody else and had them removed. So we've really got, and it's really that multi-agency coordination panel that tactically deals with that really open information sharing, and through our then Safer Colchester Partnership Board and our Delivery Board, we can broaden that to encompass the wider partnership as well. And then finally, you were talking about how do we look after people in our nighttime economy. Our street pastors, our NGOs are invaluable. Open Road, we have a fantastic relationship with Open Road, who save us hours of time on a Saturday night. They've invested to have a paramedic on the bus to look after injured parties, so that stops us having to go up to the hospital on a Saturday night and sit in casualty with people for 2 hours. But equally, they lay on a minibus that takes vulnerable people home in a safe way, whereas previously we'd be doing that. But they also pass on that information, and Open Road we use often with some of our missing who are familiar with them through their addictions, and will open up to them a lot more than they'll open up to us. And in terms of our young people and our vulnerability, it really is that education partnership and that trial that we're just starting around that early identification of the warning markers of young people being likely to be exploited, and that early diversion, such as the partnership with Colchester United, is really bearing fruit. And that wider piece, I'll be looking forward to the sort of 6 monthly report from that to see what we've achieved through that as well.
That question, okay, that answer okay, Roger? Thank you. Nothing else to add, Nathan?
I was just going to say, in terms of identifying those that are vulnerable and at risk, we our eyes are our operatives, those that are out every day. So we show them the signs of, you know, the family that haven't got food in the fridge, but they've got brand new £150 trainers. So those sort of things that we're looking out for to identify people at risk. We are training all of our operatives to identify that.
And we've really joined that up. So between 2017, I know it's going back a bit, but between 2017 and 2019, we trained just over 18,000 frontline professionals across Essex and Kent in the identifiers of exploitation. More recently, with colleagues, I did a presentation to people that go in and fix boilers, who now understand what modern slavery is, what human trafficking is, and what indicators to look out for. And that's been the key. And that joined up approach, again, through Wendy and Justice and Care, the work that our NGO partners have done to raise that awareness, so that people working in hospitals understand it, you know, our social care colleagues understand it, but actually the janitor at the hospital understands the indicators of somebody in a toilet who's having a bit of a breakdown. What do I need to do to safeguard them? So we've really broadened that partnership and that awareness, and Colchester's been at the fore of that.
Chair, could I just come in here?
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, you know, that's a very positive response we've had. I think, you know, going back to the question Councillor Lissamore asked around temporary housing unit in Lexton, I think, you know, while we put good partnerships in place, it doesn't do us any harm to look at those at times and see if that's still delivering as it should be. And certainly we've got 238 people in temporary housing at the moment. And I want us to have a look as a partnership really to make sure those individuals are being supported as they should be. But certainly the contract that is held by Peabody in respect of that accommodation at Hargood Close, they have just 2 hours each week to supply each unit of housing, which isn't a lot. I think perhaps we ought to look and make sure that they are being looked after as they should be. And of course, the level of housing support that was there in the past was much greater than 2 hours per week. And, you know, as every organisation faces funding challenges, you know, some of that, you know, investment is perhaps not there as it should be in the past. And we've got a lot of vulnerable people that are living in our temporary housing units, and it's going to increase.
Councillor Lissamore.
Thank you. I think most has already just been said, because I was going to raise exactly the same issues here, and the importance, which I raised at scrutiny before as well, of our housing officers particularly. And you rightly say, so gas service, you know, I remember many years ago I was on the board of Colchester Borough Homes, and it was just when they'd introduced you know, the 100% gas boiler service regime, and it enabled an officer of whatever level they are, whether they be, you know, a serviceman or a housing officer, to actually go into a flat of a vulnerable person who perhaps has not had an official visit for a very long time. So I'm always very concerned about the workload of housing officers. I was made aware of this a number of years ago by a situation I was aware of actually in London, not in Colchester, but in London, where somebody, a vulnerable person, had been cuckooed with a drug dealer, and they were in their flat and knew the PIN number they needed to get through to the housing officer to get repairs done. I mean, they were blatant, and the housing officer never visited. They never, you know, if they'd have gone in there, they'd have realised that this wasn't how it should be. And the vulnerable person who should be in that flat was not in that flat. So it's vitally important that we ensure our housing officers have the time that they need and do not have such a big caseload that they can't do these social visits when they're needed. Thank you.
I would just say that the housing officers, as you clearly understand, they are hugely overworked. So that is an issue in itself. However, it's from a programme that we're bringing in, actually, it started now, which is a 3-year tenancy audit programme, where we will go through the threshold of every one of our properties to check that the person in there is the tenant. We also educate neighbours around when we deal with antisocial behaviour around the signs of cuckooing. That's part of the training that we do with our operatives as well. Again, our eyes and ears. So if they see something that's not quite right, if they get that feeling in their stomach that something's not quite right, we will always investigate it, because at the heart of it, there will be or likely to be a vulnerable person.
Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chairman. We're talking about investing in young people, as just heard. We invest in young people through, when I say we, I mean the trustees and the management committee of the Oak Tree Centre. We work with young people. Every Friday night we have something in the area of 48 to 50 youngsters turn up for our youth club every Friday night, working under the umbrella of Essex Boys and Girls Clubs. And we're not alone in that. I know there are other groups in town that do the same. But it is a struggle to maintain the resources. Looking at the report where we are talking about seizure of cash and assets, is there no way in which, or maybe this does work, but I don't know, could you inform us? Seizure of cash and assets, is that reinvested in Essex, or does it disappear into a little purse somewhere outside that belongs to the government? It'd be good to know that we've cracking down on county lines and drugs and so on. if that any cash assets could be turned around and come back into looking after young people in, not just in Colchester, but obviously we are in Colchester, and I would put our youth club and our Colchester youth clubs up for the cash. Is there any way we can turn that around to invest that, or is that already happening?
So if we seize assets under the Proceeds of Crime Act, a certain percentage goes back to Mr. Hurst, and Mr. Hurst makes funding available through application such as the Safer Streets funding. A certain percentage comes back into Essex Police.
It's governed by the statute. The percentage is defined, and we get a decent percentage of it back, and we spend it in exactly the way the Chief Constable makes proposals to me, and we decide how it's distributed.
Out of interest, what a decent percentage.
I missed that. What is the decent percentage? 10%?
I'd have to check the. No, it's more than that. I have to check the amount. It's not all of it. My colleague Greg Middleton might know, who's on the line. I had to put you on the spot, Greg.
I don't know, unfortunately, Roger. Like you, I'd have to go away and find out.
We can answer that question for you, but it's a good deal more than 10%. I can't remember if it's half or 3/4 or something like that.
We certainly look forward to receiving that data, because it's clearly a matter of interest to know that the proceeds are being reinvested in the borough.
Yes, consider that a priority. Thank you.
Are there any more questions on the topic of priority one? Giving it a thorough airing. Shall we move on to priority two now, where Chief Inspector and Nathan.
Sorry, I'll turn that on, shall I? Shall I start again? I'm going to talk to you about the investment in our dedicated town centre team, our rural engagement team, which services wider Essex as well as Colchester. The work we've done around the antisocial use of motor vehicles in the borough, because that's a key ASB issue, and the management of our perpetrators of such issues. So firstly, it's about, we just need to be clear, Colchester's a huge geographic area. So when we are talking about Colchester, we're talking about the entire district, not just our city centre, as it will be shortly. But I want to talk specifically about our town centre team, soon to be our city centre team, who have been extremely successful in tackling that localised ASB and criminality. And that's been done in partnership with with our businesses, with Pubwatch, with our licensing teams, with Colchester Borough Homes, and all those partners you see listed in our Safer Colchester partnership. And that's involved investment, in the expansion of our town centre CCTV, and fortunately in further investment. So we're going to see our town centre team grow by another 4 PCs again in January. Colchester has fantastically dedicated community policing team officers. Colchester's the only area in Essex where the community policing team work till 4 o'clock in the morning. Everywhere else they close at night at 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's purely to look after our nighttime economy. But the work the town centre team has done has been not only around that visibility in the town centre, about that reassurance to our businesses and our town centre residents and disrupting criminality. It's been about ensuring that once we get hold of those criminals, they don't reoffend. And for example, one young man who was responsible for numerous graffiti incidents around the town centre, we gained a conviction and obtained an order, which means he cannot be in the town centre in possession of a pen or any kind of art material. And that's a really powerful tool, because it means when we see him on our CCTV operators call him up, we stop him, and if he's got a pen, he goes back in front of the magistrates. What a fantastic deterrent. And it's that kind of work, working with Pubwatch when we had the issues around our spiking, as I've referred to earlier. That night economy piece is really, really important to Colchester. It brings a lot of people into the centre of Colchester, and on the whole, they enjoy a really good night out. But we can't police that on our own. So we police that in partnership with our military police colleagues for those military personnel who use the town centre, but actually also with Open Road, with licensing, with street pastors, with antisocial behaviour officers, to ensure that we're keeping our community safe. And key to that is working with our businesses, and Pubwatch provides that for us. We are able to access our licensees. We have really, really proactive licensees in Colchester who want to run safe venues, who want people to have a really good night out, because that encourages more people to come. And as I mentioned, we had that spiking issue raised in the press. Within 2 days, we had a multi-agency partnership set up. Within a week, we had funding secured. And within 2 weeks, we were rolling out a media campaign to warn people of the dangers, to look at ensuring people took some responsibility for their own safety as well. And that was so successful that other districts across Essex also followed suit and took that on. But it doesn't just end with the nighttime economy. And I know there's been reference to not responding to shoplifters. Actually, we've got a really good relationship with Lion Walk, with Colfer Square, and with our retail teams in the town centre. And in the run up to Christmas, you're going to see the town centre team actually based in Longwire Street. So they'll come into the police station, kit up, pick up their gear, and they'll go and be in Longwire Street and start their patrols from there. There'll be a desk staffed by an officer for Christmas shoppers to just drop in and speak to. And that's to see how that improves our visibility. So we're always trying something new to increase that visibility. Talking about our rural locations, we've restructured our community policing team. And so areas have dedicated PCSOs who undertake visible patrols and engagement within their dedicated areas, so they can build up that relationship with their businesses, with the residents, and become a familiar face, someone that will build that trust and people will speak to. We also work really closely when we're dealing with ASB, and when we're looking at some of the issues that we're dealing with around, linking back to the drug dealing, and then the anti-social behaviour that springs off the back of that. We work really closely with Nathan and the team, and he'll talk a little bit about how we share that information and how we get those orders to close down and get rid of those tenants that are causing those big issues. Mr. Hurst has completely stolen my thunder about the rural engagement team, a really valuable team who work across the county. And since their inception have saved local policing teams in Colchester hundreds of hours, because they respond to the unauthorised encampments and they're getting them moved on a lot quicker because they've got that expertise. They're used to dealing with it. They know the powers. And we have seen a massive drop in unauthorised encampments in Colchester. And where we have seen an encampment, they're moved that much quicker. And the feedback we are getting from the people on those encampments is, yeah, actually we're starting to avoid Essex because we know we get a short shrift. So really, really positive. But equally, they've engaged with our farming community. We suffered terribly with hare coursing. We've heard how that's dropped, because that not only disrupts wildlife, but it destroys crops and people's livelihoods. And the initiatives that the partnerships brought in through the Rural Crime Toolkit, enabling those rural areas to prevent crime in the first place, rather than relying on us to solve it. And that work continues. And that links across to the investment in our business crime team, who are working really closely with the BID and really closely with organisations such as FarmWatch, to ensure that we're giving really good advice to our town and rural business owners, to ensure that we're protecting them and we're designing out crime in the first place, really focused on that prevent strand. But one of the most moving on, let me talk about antisocial use of motor vehicles. In my 3.5 years as Colchester District Commander, probably the most regular complaint we ever had was car racing, loud exhausts, loud music, and the disruption to residents through car meets. And that was not an issue we could tackle on our own. If we enforced in one area, they simply moved somewhere else. And so the partnership took on board that challenge. Our first step was working with Essex County Council as a partnership, which saw in one location some speed humps put in, although that took us 2 years to get them installed. All that did was move the cars to a completely different location. So we knew that wasn't an effective way to work. So Safe for Colchester partnership, we got together and having recognised the success of the PSPO in the town centre around drinking, decided to look at how could we use wider orders. Because what we didn't want to do was keep having this cat and mouse of moving it around the district. And so we learned from some of the lessons down at Lakeside and the PSPO they put in place there in a very specific area, and thought, right, well, let's challenge this, let's push the boundaries and go for a district-wide PSPO. Great work by our partners in the council, really hard work by the legal department, and we got it through at court and got it approved. I think we are the first area in the UK to get a complete area ban on the conditions, and we are talking really stringent conditions. We are talking more than one car together, so 2 cars we can enforce against. We're talking about if you go on social media and encourage car people to meet up, we can enforce against you. If you happen to be a retailer and decide to go and sell hot dogs to people sitting in cars in a car park causing a nuisance, we can enforce against you. If you decide to remove the catalytic converter from your car on the silencer and drive down the road with a really loud noise, we can enforce against you. It's very draconian. So far, we haven't actually enforced against it, have we? Because we haven't had any complaints, but we publicised it really well. And that's when it works. You know, it works. If the publicity works and we never prosecute anyone, but we don't get any more complaints from residents, life's golden. We will see when we come to next summer, because obviously the nights are darker, the roads are wetter, and the people that have those really flash cars with lots of chrome don't want to polish them a lot. So we generally see the complaints die off in the winter, but as we move into spring, summer next year, that's when we'll see how effective that has really been. And I'm really, really proud of the partnership for that particular piece of work. And then finally, I want to talk about our perpetrator management, and this is going to cross over into area 3, so I'm going to try and keep them separate. We have a really effective perpetrator management program protecting vulnerable people, which I'll talk about priority 3, but this is about our community policing team identifying those offenders that cause the most harm in Colchester, in terms of those repeat shoplifters, those repeat criminal damage merchants, those people who go out every Saturday night, get drunk and have a fight, and dealing with them effectively. So each of our community policing team now owns certain offenders who cause regular issues. Those are proactively targeted from a knock on their door at 9 o'clock in the morning to say, good morning, we're here and watching you, be good today or else, through to ensuring that we get the most appropriate outcome where they do commit crime. And that involves just small changes. So ensuring that if a perpetrator is identified, all the investigations relating to that one perpetrator sit with one officer, so that we can maximise the charges at court against that one officer. It's about ensuring that on every briefing, that person's face is front and centre on our mobile device. It's about knowing that on our tasking and briefing app, when a police car drives into that person's road, it actually pings up on their phone and says, perpetrator so-and-so lives at this address. Go and knock and say hello. Are the lights on? Are they in? Are they out? Put in an intelligence pool. And we really build up that intelligence picture. And that's proved really effective with the ability to get criminal behaviour orders against people and curtail their activities. And we've got a range from, you know, a community protection warning where we tell them that if you continue your behaviour, we're going to prosecute you, through to prosecuting you and putting an order on that says you can't come into our town centre with a pen, and then it's in that. So really effective, and it's really about the partnership that's achieved that. It's not something that policing can do on its own. Let me just make sure. So I think that's my bit covered. Nathan.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've all touched on it, that housing is key when it comes to managing ASB and certainly perpetrators. So when I came to the role, I wanted housing to be very much represented as a key partner. So having built several contacts with all the housing providers in Colchester, started an ASB forum. It would be naive to think that the perpetrators of antisocial behaviour that I'm dealing with in our council stock is either they're not going to be transient and move to other housing providers. So by pulling that together, we use that as a training platform. We then, having spoken to the engagement officers within Essex Police, we've transformed that into an ASB board, and that is attended once every quarter. And we really do talk about key individuals that are harming communities, and usually they are associated to a housing provider's housing stock. So that was something that we've introduced together. We have regular meetings with the field intelligence officers. That is key about, sharing that intelligence so that police can target their patrols, take the appropriate action. We obviously support when it comes to if it's our housing stock, but equally with other housing providers. We attend the bi-weekly tasking meetings, and I've been lucky enough to work with Rob and now obviously Colin, and I can see that partnership is going to carry on and continue. We're a key member of that panel, and we can provide so much support when it comes to enforcement action and disruption when it comes to perpetrators. We also sit on the Town Centre Action Panel and the Multi-Agency Coordination Panel that Rob was talking about. The other thing that we can use, again, it comes down to working in partnership. What the police can do, we can't what we can, and vice versa. So we can use housing law when it comes to demotion of tenancies. We can do management moves for those that are vulnerable. And we're also very lucky as an ALMO to have the delegated powers from Colchester Borough Council, so that we can use community protection warnings, notices, closure orders, both partial and full. So yeah, we're really lucky, and in order to obtain those, it's the role that we have is not necessarily what it's about knowing the key partners to get that information to get the job done, and we're really fortunate that we can do that within the CPT at Colchester.
If we could just move on to the next slide, please, because the final bit of this is around that reassurance to residents around their personal safety. And as we've discussed, that fear of crime actually outweighs the actual crime that's prevalent in Colchester. And if you go onto the social media channels, the Colchester Crime Watch group, etc., there is this proliferation of bad news. Colchester's an awful place. You don't see very many people actually saying, no, it's not. I had a really good night out in Colchester the other night and got home safely. So a key piece of the work we are doing is around that engagement. And I touched on it earlier. But we're working to ensure we keep our communities updated. As I said earlier, we launched a newsletter which saw circulation supported by a distribution through GP surgeries, schools, to parent lists, partner contacts, and has now been adopted by the wider force. So please, if you're not signed up to that on our website, please sign up to it. Please encourage your communities to sign up to it. And we provide regular updates on that policing activity, deliver the prevention messages and publicise engagement opportunities. Our engagement offering has expanded rapidly, as I touched on before, from coffee with cops to stroll with a patrol, regular drop-ins to school, and we've just started regular drop-ins at residential homes as well. And we've listened to feedback. This year was the second year that we've run Balling with a Bobby in partnership with Essex Rebels. We've run basketball all across the summer holidays as a diversion activity. And last year we did it fairly centralised. This year we have done it at a number of locations to allow access for a greater number of people. And for the first time this year in August, we had a police station open day, which exceeded our wildest dreams. We had over 1,500 people visit us. Even somebody came from as far away as Forest Gate because she wanted to introduce fantastic police officers to her children, which was astounding. She works in Colchester and brought her children down, which was lovely. Our independent advisory group, thanks to Tracy and Community 360, goes from strength to strength. Community 360 administer and deliver this, rightly so. It's an independent advisory group that holds police into account. And we've seen an expansion across our communities there. And we have really good open discussions and get really honest feedback from our communities on what we're doing. And one of the key focuses around our vulnerability and working with our IAG is hate crime. And we have delivered a number of interventions to tackle and reduce that in partnership across the borough with various organisations. We've seen the expansion of our hate incident reporting centres, a massive growth in our hate crime ambassadors, again, working to the principle that a number of people might not want to talk to police officers, but they would trust another organisation. And so just an example of that, we work really closely with Refugee Action, and a couple of people who were their clients were suffering some quite serious abuse actually, but wouldn't come forward to report it, where their origin country, the police are not to be trusted at all and are to be avoided at all costs. And it was really great to see that the hate crime ambassador actually supported those victims, gave them the courage to actually come forward and speak to police officers. We arranged for officers to go to Refugee Action and meet them there rather than them coming into the police station. And then we worked with Colchester Borough Homes to deliver a community protection warning to the suspect. And we're now in that further evidence gathering stage to consider a prosecution. We've worked really closely with the university as well. The university is a real key partner here, not only for our foreign students and the investment they bring, but for that growth in population that we see during term times and the investment those students bring into Colchester. And key to that is Freshers Week. We've just run an operation with the university around Freshers Week. We embedded the start of this operation 2 years ago with our Public Protection Command. We noticed an increase in the reporting of sexual offences in the first 2 weeks of university, where lots of students went out and got drunk. And so we have embedded into the initial curriculum of the university, that induction piece, inputs around consent and around safer relationships. And if you've never seen the video, please, when you get home tonight, video, what an old school term, have a look on YouTube or the social medias. Consent is like a cup of tea. It's a fantastic explanation of what consent is, and is really embedded. But also a number of the young people have never lived away from home before. So we talk about personal responsibility, safety, what friends should do for each other on nights out. And made them an integral part of our IAG as well. And in terms of hate crime, Colchester Borough Council, Colchester Borough Homes have teams of now ambassadors, hate crime trained ambassadors, and we continue to expand that. And we're expanding our networks and awareness with forthcoming presentations for the Royal Association for the Deaf as well. So we're trying to be really, really inclusive. We've seen an increase in hate crime reporting, 53 incidents more than in the previous 12 months. I'm actually really pleased with that, because that means more people are confident to come forward and talk to us. And I want to see that confidence increase. I want to see people keen to come forward. Our two highest wards are Castle and Mile End, which you might expect. Castle Ward tends to be linked to the nighttime economy, predominantly abuse towards bouncers and bar staff when people are being ejected. And our Mile End ward tends to be towards our NHS colleagues. And so we've got a dedicated officer now from our CPT who works in our mental health units, gives awareness training to the NHS staff, works with the care providers around ensuring those staff are appropriately trained in the right defensive techniques, etc. And ensures that we coordinate the investigation against people who abuse our NHS colleagues. And again, really proud of that model. It's just been adopted by Chelmsford as well, with a dedicated officer for the mental health unit and Bromfield Hospital down there too. And we're working with our mental health lead to look at where else we might want to replicate that in the county. But really key, the message from me is please, 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 we need that third party endorsement. The Safer Colchester partnership's really good. Go out there, tell your people, tell our community that actually behind the scenes, the stuff they don't see is keeping them safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can kick off the questioning to Nathan. As a Colchester Borough Councillor bean counter, there must be a significant on cost for the setting up of the information channels which we've been hearing about, albeit that they are necessary. I don't know whether they are quantified in a cost benefit way. More worryingly, we do that sort of thing because we're a responsible landlord within the owner of the responsibility landlord. CBH is a separate company. To what extent do other social landlords engage to the same level of protection as CBH? I mean, are you unique, or is it being done elsewhere? Because we heard earlier on from Councillor Young that of an instance where another social landlord did not seem to be behaving in the same responsible way that CBH is behaving. Do you have a view on the cost and the extent to which others are prepared to do it?
When it comes to cost, just it's through the connections that in my role and my previous role when I worked alongside CBC Closer, when we had a service level agreement around other aspects of ASB, it's just connections that I made naturally through that role. So there was no real cost in getting those people together to come to an ASB forum. The costs, you could argue, having a load of professionals that are dealing with housing law in one room can actually save a lot of time. It's a place where you can brainstorm and talk about cases if you wish. And now, because it's evolved into having police on board and they now chair that, actually we've got the right partners in the room to do what we need to do. So when it comes to that, I can't really see that there's a cost, only a saving when it comes to time. Your second question around other housing providers not doing the same as what CBH do, a lot of that will come down to because we're lucky enough to have some delegated powers where we can deal with certain aspects of ASB when it affects the community. So we can use CPWs, CPNs, community protection warnings and notices and closure orders. That said, we extend that to our other housing providers. We work again with that housing provider, with the police, to get community impact statements, and we can guide them through the process. I think what people tend to forget is we are evidence gatherers. We present the evidence to the court. The unsung heroes in here at the moment, I have to say, is CBC's legal department, because without them, you know, that makes our life very much more difficult. They are very, very good at what they do, and they make our jobs very much easier by presenting the evidence that we have to the judge or the magistrate. But the particular case that Councillor Young was referring to, I mean, you know, I have regular meetings with Peabody. They come to the ASB board, and I am a point of contact for them. So, you know, they've always got advice if they need it. Sometimes their own legal departments are their barriers, but I can't comment on individual housing providers. It wouldn't be right of me. But in all, everybody is looking for one common goal, and that is to reduce ASB. And ultimately, they don't want their housing stock to be the enemy.
Is this an area where we should be recommending that the partnership extends its reach to ensure that best practice is really being carried out by the larger social landlords rather than being done in an ad hoc way?
You know, if you look at those longer reach partners that are part of it, you have got other housing providers that are involved in the partnership. And those that aren't, they are more than willing to be part of our ASB board. So there's no reluctancy there whatsoever. And everybody, like I say, nobody wants to have an unpopular housing stock because you're just going to make enemies. Equally, if one of our housing stock, if CBC's housing stock is affected by another landlord, we can take action against that landlord for their inaction. So nobody wants to be in that position, and touch wood to date, we've not had to ever use that.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly,
You actually stole my question. Tim, so-
My apologies.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Willis on that. And the question was about CBH does a really good job with antisocial behaviour, as we all know, and responds very well. But the other housing associations. Okay. I thought we were 9 o'clock wake up call. Yeah, they don't do as good, and we really struggle to push them to take action against some of the residents. Lee is forever, drives me mad. I think he does. He's got a list of them that we all do. But would there be a time where we would, if we had to take action against them for their lack of action, because residents who live nearby, they're forever reporting that with the housing association, mainly because they've got a housing officer based in Chelmsford. One big association has that. That's not very good. But is there a way that we could do that, really? Because it's taken forever to deal with an issue that CBH would have dealt with straight away.
There are options available, yes. So for the CSP, it would be Lisa or Sonia that would consider maybe serving that particular housing provider with a community protection warning if there is an impact on the community. So if there is, then yes. But we have to be really mindful that we don't want to burn those bridges. Because a lot of these housing providers, they may be based elsewhere in Essex, but they will have housing stock in our borough. You know, I always try and do it amicably first. And like I said, I've never had to start going down that route. But if needs be, then yeah, there is options there for us to serve some community protection warnings.
Oh, well, that's good to know. And I think that Sonia and Mel would know me. That we will go for one person and prosecute them, and others will probably fall in place quite well. The other thing is not a question, it's just a public thank you to yourselves. I'm a hate crime ambassador as well, and you help with a issue down in Roe Hedge. You wouldn't think that a hate crime occurred, quite horrendous as well.
Yeah,
the person was an obnoxious person, and myself and Adam Fox, Councillor Fox, we turned up to see this lady about a planning application that she wasn't happy about, and we witnessed this woman abuse and racial abuse against this poor man who was just come over to help his daughter settle into a new life in Roe Hedge and indeed in Colchester, and she didn't know where to go. And we said, well, no, you must. And lucky for her, but we were there as well, and she's so thanks for the swift action, and hopefully that person will learn and behave, but I somehow doubt it myself. But thanks very much to yourselves.
No, thank you. And that's the key thing about the hate crime ambassadors. It's about knowing where to signpost support and ultimately educate against it. So no, thanks for providing us with the details that we needed.
Are there any more questions? It was clearly the presentation on priority 2 was very convincing. No, very few gaps left for us to question. Okay, can we move on to priority 3 then? Support for victims of domestic abuse, sexual offences. It's a far more difficult area than the other two, given the human relationships involved.
That's it. Cool. Okay. So, as you say, Chair, very challenging. And nationally, policing is really aware of the impact following the Sarah Everard case, and the publicity around the misogyny following that from the Met Police, and the subsequent revelations. And I think we touched upon that vetting issue and integrity earlier. but Essex have pulled together a really comprehensive strategy based upon the Code of Ethics. And you've heard from Mr. Hurst, our chief does not tolerate misbehaviour. Our professionalism strategy is key to showing our integrity, delivering those high standards of service and building that confidence in people to report to us. From that, we've developed a diversity, inclusion and equality strategy as well. And I touched on it earlier, you know, when the police service was formed by Sir Robert Peel, he said the police are the community and the community of the police. We need to be reflective of our society to engender that confidence and build trust. And we're really aware of the rate at which Colchester is growing and the diversity of our communities. And it's been great through the Community Safety Partnership to enjoy some really positive relationships with some of those groups, you know, for example, African families in the UK. But through the community policing team, the OPFCC education team and partners at Next Chapter, as I've already mentioned, we work across schools to promote those safer relationships training. And we continue that engagement through School Leaver and the university, working both at the university and at the colleges. And it's through that partnership that we're going to change that perception. And the IAG has proved invaluable to explore those cultural attitudes to domestic abuse. I'm sure many of you are aware of the tragic case where the two lecturers at a university, she was killed by him, and he had passed a comment in a community setting about how he was going to stab her. And in the course of our investigation, members of that community said, wow, that's something somebody would say in our community. And that raised us a lot of concerns. So we actually took that specific question through our IAG back into our communities here and had that reassurance that across those communities, comments like that wouldn't be ignored. And I know that Bev will talk about it, some of the training that Next Chapter are delivering across our wider communities. But key is the investment that we've seen in our domestic abuse teams, in our violence and vulnerability team, and I've covered them in another area. So I'll talk about our domestic abuse teams. Not only have we seen an increase in those investigating domestic abuse, but we've seen an increase in investment to prevent domestic abuse in the first place and disrupt offenders with the formation of our domestic abuse problem solving teams. We enjoy a really proactive team here in Colchester who service the whole north of Essex. But we're using some data analytics. We identify our highest risk cohort of victims and of offenders, and those are allocated for management to that team. One half of the team is dedicated to supporting the victims and getting them out of their situation, giving them the confidence and empowering them to make decisions that are best for them. And one side of the cohort is dedicated to disruption of those offenders, either through getting them to engage in behaviour change programs to acknowledge and recognise their behaviour and develop that behaviour to prevent further offending, or through prosecution for offences. And to give you an example on the victim side, an 18-month engagement, an officer built a relationship with this female. She was actually being abused by her father, but was still living at the family home. So really tragic domestic abuse there, real lack of confidence, didn't feel she could move on with her life. Kept breaking that relationship with the officer, but the officer persisted and said, I'm here for you whenever you need us, come and talk to us. Over the course of that 18 months, eventually she came forward with support from housing. We found her housing. The officers on that team actually gave up their weekend and painted the house for her. Went round and got furniture for her. We helped her into education and training. When she felt strong enough, she came forward to us and actually was prepared to support prosecution. And we were then able to prosecute her father for that abuse. So that's the kind of investment we're looking at making with those victims, that long-term engagement, working really closely with our partners, our independent domestic violence advisors. On the offender side, the team are currently managing 26 of the highest risk offenders that present the greatest threats. And as I said, they're engaged and encouraged to reflect on their behaviour, participate in change programmes, and then where they won't, we will seek to prosecute them. And that we will look for any avenue to prosecute them to safeguard those victims. And obviously we can use the various disclosure law to make disclosures to new partners that they come into contact with. And then as we get those people into prison, we can then work with the prisons to manage their rehabilitation in prison, their release, and further monitoring when they come out. Let me just check and make sure I have covered everything I wanted to talk about there. And finally, again, it's just to touch on, this is really about engagement. It's about ensuring that all our communities in Colchester have that confidence to come forward and report. And that may take some time, but it's about empowering people, understanding the trauma they've been through, understanding where they're at, and being able to support them appropriately. So I'll hand over to Ben.
Thank you. Could we go down to the next slide, please? And I do apologise, I'm glasses on, glasses off, only just emotionally accepted that I need to wear glasses. So they're on and off all the time. So my approach to telling you a bit about what we do as Next Chapter, we're the commission providers for Mid, North and a bit of West Essex. So we essentially have half of Essex. Geographically, it feels like about 2/3. And I think in terms of numbers of referrals that come through to us, we're about 2/3 of the county as well. So my approach really has been to give you a bit of context, tell you about what we do and what works, what some of our successes are, and then just a little bit about what the future opportunities look like. So rather than it being an entirely backward looking look at what we do. So I've put a graph up there. It's really difficult to see, but what you can clearly see is that we have a trajectory that is going up and it's not stopping going up. We all thought that when we got to the end of lockdown and when we got to the point where people were allowed out of their homes and all the restrictions had gone, that we would start to see a plateau and a downward trend in terms of numbers of referrals to us. That hasn't happened. It's still going up. And even in the last 3 months, we've seen the highest numbers of referrals that we've ever seen in the history of our organisation, and we've been going for 45 years in December. Context for Colchester around that is, so in our entire area we've risen by about 45% in the last 2 years. That means that in the last 2 years we've seen about 1,200 additional referrals come through to us. Colchester of that make up just shy of 30%. So by far it's my hometown. So we make up the greatest proportion of DA referrals through to us as an organisation. And Colchester themselves have seen a 35% increase in the numbers of referrals coming through. So it's serious business. And we know that it is the single biggest referral that comes through to the police in terms of violent crime. It's everybody's business, and we're really clear about that, but it's not going down, unfortunately. We thought about why is that. I think there is something about Sarah Everard. There's the national conversation about violence against women and girls, and about how we keep women safe. Have we got justice for women? How do we move the responsibility from being about women understanding how to keep themselves safe to saying actually it's everybody's job to keep women safe, and it's up to men to call out behaviour that isn't acceptable and to understand why it makes women feel vulnerable in particular areas. Sorry, I'll get on the platform now. I will get off it. I'm conscious of time. We also know that through those national conversations that the baseline may now have irreversibly gone up. We know that it's not coming down, but in other areas where even it has started to plateau, it still hasn't started to go down. So I think that awareness, which is a brilliant thing, the fact that people are far more aware of it as an issue, it's always been an absolutely hidden behind closed doors, one of those secret things that you don't talk about because it's something you should be ashamed about. It's something that's a bit dirty. It's something that is your fault, and we absolutely know that it isn't. The only person's fault it is the perpetrator who chooses to undertake that behaviour. Why are we seeing so many cases that we're holding? Probably court backlogs. We know through the pandemic that when the court stopped running as many cases, when they closed down, we're seeing massive backlogs. We've got prosecutions for domestic abuse cases that are being listed for 18 months' time. It's really difficult to say to a victim of domestic abuse, you're out of the relationship now, you're moving on, you're trying to make your new life, but we want to hold you in that place for the next 18 months while you hold on to all of that history and all of that trauma so that you can use that again in order to get a successful prosecution. And as much as they absolutely want to support that, we totally support people who just want to get on with their lives for their sake, for their children's sake. And I think it's a real tension that we are finding in terms of being able to keep those prosecution rates up, not seeing cases dropped, assisting people to support those prosecutions when actually the court system is saying, here you go, 18 months, 2 years time. Emergency non-molestation orders, that are the piece of paper that is intended to help keep people safe. So emergency ones of those taking 3 or 4 months to get to court to be heard. How can that possibly be right? I'm ranting again, sorry, I will. And we're also seeing a rise in our risk profile. So we are seeing victims and survivors that are coming through to us with way more complex situations in terms of the domestic abuse that they are experiencing, exacerbated by the pandemic and by the areas of coercive control that were able to be put in place during the pandemic that haven't yet, relinquished their hold. Once ground is gained, it's really difficult for somebody to get that back again. And there's always new technology. I think only this week did we see that there's a rolling out of your ability to access your GP records and to be able to see all of the notes that were put. And of course, if somebody goes in and they talk to their GP about the fact that that they are in an abusive relationship, that they might be struggling, we know that health professionals are the most trusted professionals in terms of disclosures. So if that's on their notes, and then actually their perpetrator is with them and forces them to log in to sign up to that system so that they can see the notes of the victim, all of that information is there. What if that GP is part of the MARAC, multi-agency risk assessment conference, where we talk about our highest risk victims? What if that MARAC report is sent to the GP and the GP thinks, okay, I'll upload that to the person's record? It feels like we have to stay 3 steps ahead of everything, and then in order to stay ahead and to protect, we have to fight then to claw back some of those protections. So there's an awful lot going on, but it sounds all very depressing, but it isn't, because we're doing an awful lot of good work. I think the fact that the whole recognition of DA has raised, meaning that we're getting all of these new referrals through to us, means that there are more and more people who are seeking our support. I don't think it's new DA, I think it's just DA that's always been there, but that raising of awareness has meant that people know where to come to get help now. Our partnership working is fantastic. It feels like we work with just about everybody around us. We work incredibly well with the police. We've got some really fabulous local partnerships out there, and I know Rob's talked a bit about the DAPS team. We're just about to start what feels like a groundbreaking new project with the DAPS team, where we've achieved together in partnerships and funding from the Home Office to have a change of the way that you identify those high risk perpetrators, and with it those high risk victims, that goes away from the sort of frequency and recency that you have previously looked at, and says, actually, let's look at some different criteria that's based around severity and number of partners, repeat numbers of partners, because actually they're our highest risk perpetrators, and then numbers of victims who have repeat numbers of perpetrators. They're our highest risk. I haven't got used to not flapping the glasses around, sorry. They're our highest risk victims. So our partnership work is saying, actually, police, whilst you need to work with victims in order to maintain that relationship to get the evidence, as far as supporting people goes, that's our job. We do that best. And what's the police do best is dealing with the perpetrators, is investigating that crime and making sure that you hold people to account. So that is a brilliant partnership that we're working. And I know that the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice are looking specifically at that particular project because they think that it will inform national policing practice around dealing with domestic abuse. We work with our local communities, with AFIUC, with Outhouse, with Refugee Action. We try to make sure that we have champions in all of the communities that are around and about us so that they can, whilst they might not be able to encourage their communities to come to us, we can give them enough knowledge so that they can support at arm's length from within their own communities. We're reshaping some of our services and have done with support from CBC around introducing a male practitioner so that we can absolutely address the fact that 1 in 6 men are victims of domestic abuse. It isn't just for women. It absolutely is a gendered crime, but men experience it as well. And also from a really good success rate, we have a 25% re-referral rate into Next Chapter. That means that 25% of the people that we support come back to us for future support. Now, you could say that that's 25% too many, but if you think about how domestic abuse works, sometimes we will have somebody come to us 5, 6, 7, 8 times before they're really ready to do something about it. And the fact that people are coming back to us to seek that support is so positive because it means they know where to come, they know where to get that help, and eventually they will become one of the 75% that don't need to come back to us because they've secured their future without domestic abuse. Sorry, I was on slide 2 now. I'm just yapping. Sorry. And then some of the other things we do, we've managed to secure some inward investment into our area around domestic abuse through Children in Need. Essex County Council have continued funding a project that we started in partnership with Colchester Borough Council and other neighbouring authorities, and we've got Ministry of Justice and Home Office funding that has come in. We have reshaped our services, taking into account the need that's in our local area. So we've looked very much at our children and young people service. There wasn't anything out in the community for children and young people, which seems quite incredible, but the Domestic Abuse Act now recognises children as victims in their own right. Which is brilliant because anybody who's worked in it knows that a child doesn't sit in their bedroom and not listen, and if they do hear it, they're absolutely affected by it. They're a victim of domestic abuse in their own right. I've put a couple of quotes up there just because actually what we do in the voice of our clients is the most important thing. So yeah, a couple of beautiful quotes. The last one, Amy, she was brutally attacked. She nearly died, which is a really sobering thought for us because we work so hard to assist people to stay safe that it's not a level of complacency, but because there's a lot of time passes between actually the risk that somebody's at being realized into something, that it brings it back to you just how important the safety planning is and that work that we do with people. And actually she has said that it was only her safety plan that enabled her to have the presence of mind of what to do when her perpetrator arrived on her doorstep with cleavers, knives, rip ties and plastic sheeting. She wasn't coming out of that house alive, but it was her presence of mind and the knowledge of her safety plan that enabled her to be able to call for help while sending him off to go and get her mobile phone from another room, which we're incredibly grateful for. So, and then just last slide, I'll be really quick. Just in terms of our future, we're really proud that we are the expert go-to services. We want to keep that, and we want to keep skilling our staff. We're working really hard to raise our profile to make sure that that national conversation, our local conversation about DA continues. Working in partnership, especially with our DAPS team locally, reshaping our services. Our recovery programs are really key, moving on to make sure that we don't just support in crisis, but that we help people recover and actually move on into their lives and leave it behind them. And then our opportunities are around all that the DA Act brings, all of those opportunities for development of our services, for additional funding that is out there, and for us to plug some of those gaps that are there, that are getting smaller by the day. Thank you.
If I can start off questioning, I'm not sure whether I misheard, but did you say that 30% of your caseload was from the Colchester borough?
Yes, that's right.
And Colchester represents 10% of Essex, but you don't cover the south. So that seems marginally high to me. I'm not quite sure whether it veers into disproportionately high, but it seems high. I mean, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it is higher than other areas. I think there's probably some reasons, historical reasons around that. I mean, our numbers are higher than those that the police get, principally because not all victims of DA want to go through the criminal justice system. They don't want to go to the police. I think the fact that we used to be Colchester and Tendring Women's Refuge, the fact that our two refuges are in Colchester, means that Colchester population has a better knowledge of us and possibly feel that they have better access. But Colchester has always been our highest district in terms of numbers and proportionately more in the area that we cover.
Councillor Lilly.
With Councillor, question, is there a breakdown of figures of who reports it? Is there a certain person or people that domestic violence is caused by them higher we could have? But that wasn't my question. That was just a follow on from Dennis's. The one I had was, you probably fall under the same what the police have. Crime is going up, it's rising, but it's reported crime that's going up, which is a good thing really, because it is being reported more. And hopefully that's the case in your area, that more people are more aware of where they can go now. And that years ago, as you said, it was just behind closed doors that you'd spot somebody with a black eye or something like that, and you'd have an inkling, but they just wouldn't say nothing. I bumped into the cupboard syndrome sort of thing. So hopefully that's it's the way that they're doing things like that. But the one thing that concerns me is if somebody like that mad person who turned up with knives and stuff, you would probably have to take an injunction out against that person to do that. And to do that, you'd have to go to court. Do you get a priority of that happening? That you need an injunction straight away and you need against this person. Is there a court that you can go to and have that granted? Or do you really still have to wait? Please don't tell me you still have to wait an awful long time.
Unfortunately, we do. We don't have any priority. Colchester don't have a specialist DA court. I think historically we used to, and I think everybody who has anything to do with DA would argue that would be the best thing in terms of being both the understanding of the court and the speed of getting through. I mean, in that particular situation, clearly we worked really closely with our partners in the police. So that person wasn't out on the streets. We didn't need to get an injunction. That was part of an ongoing prosecution. They were in custody, not to be let out. So so in those really severe cases, then the criminal justice system absolutely works. I think where it's coercive control, where somebody's terrified but nothing has happened, they're the ones that are really difficult, because it's this evidence gathering of that pattern of behaviour that is causing harassment and distress. And I just wanted to say that we are also trialling with Colchester Police their Culpa app, which I think Rob made reference to, which is we're seeing how it can be used for victims of domestic abuse, where they have the ability to upload their evidence via their phone and send it straight in, so that it is evidently ready for the police to use, which is absolutely brilliant. Really moves things on in terms of evidence collection for victims and survivors.
Okay, well, that sounds good, but you still have to wait an awful long time for that, and you don't get a priority at all. The case comes in over like a small shoplifting one, but are there other areas that have a different system to us, or is there any way that we could try and influence the judicial system? Obviously it needs to be put in place, doesn't it? Because if you have an injunction for a year, I think it's for a year, at the end of the year you then have to reapply, don't you? And that gives an opportunity for the perpetrator to think he's done his year and they could start up again. Yeah, it's very worrying, isn't it? It's not right.
I'm conscious that you want to come in. I was just going to say that from our perspective, we've tried really hard and worked with partners in terms of informing the courts. So the courts have given priority to a number of strands of cases, and DA is one of those. But just the sheer volume means that even with a priority, we are still looking at those delays in order to get them through the courts, just through lack of capacity that they have.
Yeah, I was just going to support, but Bev mentioned about, victims waiting 18 months and being in that holding pattern, but they can't move on with their lives. And what you were talking about, we're now to upload the evidence. So what we're looking at is the option to deliver evidence-led prosecutions that don't rely on victims going into court. It's tried and tested under the Modern Slavery Act, using those evidence-led prosecutions elsewhere in the country. And it's a key bit of our investigation is how do we get that perpetrator into court early, and where there is that delay, what restrictions can we put on them now so they can't reoffend, and B, how do we build the case so it's strong enough that it doesn't need our victims stood in that witness box reliving all that trauma. But the court system, it's a big challenge for us nationally since COVID.
Are there any other questions on this particular topic? Thank you. On other matters, I had been intending to ask a question on a statement by Andy Cook about statement about not investigating burglaries, but it appears that that question was answered much earlier on, that we have exemplary performance in Essex, and it's other counties that are letting down the side, so we don't need to look at that. Are there any other matters about the programme and the priorities of the Safer Colchester Partnership which members wish to address? All okay. So, just thinking about what we've learned this evening, as ever, it's been a long haul, and I think it needs to be once a year. We need to convince ourselves that that the partnership is working and continues to work well. The expectation is that it works well. Therefore, the fact that we haven't got any really serious issues, I think, developing this evening is the norm, is the expectation. But nevertheless, it's essential that we do carry out the review and that we scrutinise what is happening. Listening to the debate, the first thing that struck me was from a peer review point of view from the Crime Commissioner and what others were saying, is that Colchester does appear to have one of the best partnerships in Essex, and that is certainly a noteworthy achievement, although it mustn't lead to complacency. The partnership is a strong partnership, and it appears to be an effective partnership, and it has a well-aligned plan to ensure that you get the best out of all your members as and when you need them to be involved, and that point was well argued. I was surprised by the range of the information channels which have been developed to underpin the partnership and the police work. quite surprised about the number of people who are keeping their eyes open without being too intrusive, but just watching out for abuse or possible drugs dealing and the signs of it. That certainly shows superb initiative in getting those working. In terms of the areas where I think members had some difficulty, I mean, the first was Councillor Scordis's second question, which was we have more police officers, but members of the community don't see them. And I think that's a valid complaint, but I think it was well answered and exemplified by the Chief Inspector on why it is people don't necessarily see lots of police officers. But it's still a bit of a worry. I think there is still a bit of a question mark there. Perhaps we're not explaining to our residents why it is that they don't see police officers. One wonders whether it needs to be a little further work done to satisfy Councillor Scordis's second question. So I probably put I'm not sure it's strong enough for a recommendation from us, but it's certainly an area where there is a worry, and perhaps we just need to minute it rather than recommending any specific line of action.
And we will note.
Area. There was
I said we'll note. Thank you.
Yeah, good. The second area raised by Councillor Hogg was really the materiality limit on when you start reporting antisocial behaviour. Really trivial stuff doesn't need to get reported, but is there an understanding in the community of the point at which it is useful for the police and the other agencies in the partnership to start receiving intelligence about where antisocial behaviour is happening? Is that point clearly defined? Is it understood both by the agencies and, more importantly, by residents? At what point does antisocial behaviour become worth reporting? And I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I'm not sure anyone has. But is it an area where we could usefully make a recommendation that there should be better briefing of the public on the point at which they spring into action and actually report matters?
What would happen, Chairman, what would help, be particularly probation services, if you advertise a service, make sure that somebody's there to answer the phone. Because here, having been told to make a report specifically to probation services, they never answer the phone. And if they do, if you leave a message, please phone me back on such and such, please email me on such and such, they still don't phone you back, they still don't email you. So the public, our residents, need confidence in the reporting procedure. Isn't there if nobody answers the phone?
Yeah, and that leads us straight on, Mike, to the third area of worry, which I think members of the committee identified, and that was we were hearing about a much wider range of methodologies for reporting to the police via social media, via internet. So I certainly didn't know I could report it on social media, and perhaps that was a defect against me. If it's a defect against me, then presumably lots of other people do not realise just what a wide range of opportunities there are to be able to report crime. And I wonder whether more should be done by the partnership to ensure that that information is clearly and simply disseminated to everyone. And I think, as was said during the questioning, there are some people, a very small number of people, besides Chief Inspector's 84-year-old grandfather, who do not have access to the internet, and they will always need the telephone service. But is there the possibility of being more active in promoting the methods of reporting? I think that could be useful. And the fourth area where members had doubt was all the good work we're hearing about what the partnership and the police are doing to identify offenders and bring them before the courts, there seems to be considerable problems on drugs-related issues, on domestic violence and abuse, about getting cases before the courts. And I wonder whether we should, perhaps not via the crime and disorder panel, but via a scrutiny panel, because we're the same members, we should perhaps be having a work item to look at the effectiveness of getting cases to court in a more rapid time as a matter which will benefit the whole of the borough. Mike.
When I'm portfolio holder, and Mel will remember this, with Pam, that it came up then, didn't we? We had a meeting with Nick Chilvers, who's an ex-magistrate, and what we could do as a council to help push forward. But he said you can't do anything about it. They are a law. Well, it's a bit of a joke. There was nothing that we could do to influence, to get them in, for us to influence. And we did really, really try in doing that, didn't we, Mel? And if we can get them in, fantastic, to push them along. But it was a different one. But on another subject, the probation service, were they due here tonight? Because are they on the screen, are they? Because we have a lot of questions for them, and but they might come out another time. We've run out of time, so.
Yes, we're certainly running out of time, and the door closes in some 10 minutes or so. I mean, do we feel strongly enough to say that we should have another go at CPS and those involved in getting cases before the magistrates? I know it's a national problem, and we may be advised by our professional advisors that it's just beating our head against a brick wall, but I quite enjoy beating my head against a brick wall at times. Yeah, so we'll include that as a minute. I'm not sure what the difference between a minute and a recommendation is, but as long as you've captured the issues where we need to take action as the Crime and Disorder Committee.
I'll take a resolution to that effect, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, good resolutions. Are there any other matters which members of the committee wish to note, having heard the extensive discussions of this evening?
That we note the length and breadth of the work which is going on, Chairman. In all, it's about the good work going on.
Well, yeah, I think it's superb. Thanks to everyone who's participated, and we that they do so well, and we bring them in here and grill them for 4 hours, which is a bit unfair, but there's no other way of doing it. So if there are no other proposals for sorts of recommendations or points to be noted, can I get to the portfolio holder? Are there any additional items you wish to ask to give after the debate we've had, Councillor Young?
No, I don't think there is. I think, I would like to reassure the panel that, I'm really interested in what Nathan had to say in terms of the ASB forum, and we know what Colchester Borough Homes do and do that very successfully. I suppose for me, I'd like to, satisfy myself that other housing providers are, operating at the same sort of level, if that's possible, given the legislation. But sort of looking at it from a different perspective, I think we are going to see many more people finding themselves in a situation where they're homeless that will end up in temporary accommodation. And at this moment in time, I feel a bit uneasy that those individuals are being safeguarded in the way that they should be safeguarded and do get access to the services that they should be getting. And, I'll follow that up actually as portfolio holder myself.
So you're going to follow that up as within your own portfolio holder, rather than us recording it as a minute, or should we do both?
I think it'd be helpful to do both, Chair.
So we also record our concerns that the good practice of CBH is not universal, or is not proven as being universal across the borough amongst other social landlords. If that's not maligning them. And Roger, from the Commissioner's point of view, are there any final comments you wish to make?
Nothing really to add to my original preamble, apart from to say thank you very much. It's really good to be able to join you in scrutinising the performance of the partnership.
Thank you for helping us this evening. So my final thanks to our professional colleagues, particularly the Chief Inspector, duty beyond the call, really. Coming back, always welcome to see you. Thank you for your help this evening in guiding us through what is a very extensive work programme in a very complex matrix managed partnership, and it is quite difficult for us as councillors to fully understand what is being done, the effect of what you're doing and the efficiency with which it's being done. We try in our own humble way. I'm sure we don't fully succeed, but we succeed to the extent that we can be satisfied that the partnership is working well, it's working effectively, the partners are working together, and we have a sort of peer review from the Essex perspective that it is working jolly well. So can I thank you for your attendance this evening? Thank you. And thank colleagues, councillor colleagues, for persevering with us until the doors closed this evening. And thanks to everyone. Can I close the meeting?
Thank you.